Hey guys! Tonight we will see why you couldn't probably handle Roman women. Before that, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comment where you tuning from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Before you settle into the ancient streets of Rome, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights if you can, adjust your pillow, and let the sounds of the modern world drift quietly into the background. Tonight, we're traveling nearly 2,000 years into the past, not to meet emperors or witness famous battles, but to experience the everyday life of Roman women. When people imagine ancient Rome, they often think of grand temples, victorious legions, and glittering marble palaces. But behind those impressive monuments lived millions of ordinary people whose lives were shaped by strict customs, demanding families, and endless daily work. For Roman women, life could be comfortable or incredibly difficult depending on wealth, status, and a little bit of luck. Yet even the richest women lived within expectations that might surprise us today. So, take one slow breath, let your eyes grow heavy, and imagine the warm Mediterranean sun rising over tiled rooftops. The streets are already filling with merchants, servants, senators, and children. Somewhere among them, your story is about to begin. A world that has already chosen your place. The first rays of morning sunlight spill across the rooftops of Rome, warming the curved red tiles that cover thousands of homes packed tightly together. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster announces the beginning of another day, though judging by the sounds coming from the streets below, the city hardly seems to have slept at all. As you slowly open your eyes, the air already carries the familiar smells of baking bread, wood smoke, damp stone, and the faint scent of olive oil. Merchants are arranging their stalls before sunrise. Donkeys pull carts through narrow streets paved with worn stone. Bakers tend glowing ovens while water sellers begin their daily rounds. It is a busy city, one of the greatest the world has ever known. And unlike many visitors who dream of arriving here as a victorious general or a wealthy senator, your story begins somewhere far less glamorous. You are about to discover what life might have been like as a Roman woman. That may not sound particularly alarming at first. After all, Rome was a civilization famous for engineering, magnificent temples, grand theaters, and impressive laws. Surely living in the heart of such an advanced empire couldn't have been too difficult. Well, history has a habit of hiding its uncomfortable details beneath polished marble. Long before your first memories, before your first steps, and certainly before your first opinion about anything at all, your future had already begun taking shape. In ancient Rome, your family mattered enormously. The household into which you were born could determine almost every opportunity that followed. A daughter born into the family of a senator would experience a very different childhood from one born above a noisy workshop or inside a crowded apartment overlooking the market. Yet despite these differences, Roman society expected nearly every woman to follow a path that had been carefully prepared long before she arrived. Your father stood at the center of that world. Roman families were led by the paterfamilias, the senior male head of the household. His authority extended over children, property, finances, family decisions, and, in many periods of Roman history, an extraordinary amount of influence over everyone's daily lives. This did not necessarily mean every father ruled with cruelty. Many loved their families deeply and worked tirelessly to provide for them. But affection and authority were not the same thing. A loving father could still make decisions that no one else was expected to question. As a daughter, your life unfolded within that structure. Today, choosing where to live, whom to marry, or what career to pursue is often considered a personal decision. In Rome, those choices frequently belonged to someone else. Fortunately, childhood itself was not entirely joyless. If your family had enough money, you might own small toys carved from wood, little dolls with movable arms and legs, tiny clay animals, or polished stones used for games. Archaeologists have uncovered many of these objects, reminding us that children everywhere have always found ways to laugh, imagine, and play. You would chase friends through courtyards, watch pigeons scatter across busy squares, and invent games while adults discuss matters that seemed endlessly serious. For a few precious years, the world still felt wonderfully large. Yet childhood in Rome never lasted very long. Adults viewed boys and girls differently from an early age. Sons were gradually introduced to public life, education, politics, military ideals, or family businesses, depending on their social class. Daughters learned something else entirely. They watched their mothers, or grandmothers, or older sisters. Every meal prepared, every garment woven, every household managed became another quiet lesson. No classroom announced these lessons with a bell. The household itself became the classroom. You learned how bread was baked, how wool was cleaned before spinning, how clothing was repaired instead of discarded, and why keeping a household running required constant attention. Rome was enormous, but every Roman home depended upon thousands of ordinary tasks that had to be repeated every single day. Someone swept the floors. Someone prepared the lamps before sunset. Someone fetched water. Someone stored grain safely away from hungry mice. Someone kept track of food before it spoiled during the Mediterranean summer. Much of that invisible labor belonged to women. If your family was wealthy, servants performed many of these jobs while you supervised or learned how to manage them. If your family was poor, there were no servants. Only work. Endless, ordinary work. Perhaps that is one of history's greatest tricks. The stories of emperors fill books. The stories of ordinary women are hidden inside countless small routines repeated so often that few ancient writers considered them remarkable enough to record. Yet those routines built Rome every bit as much as its famous armies. As the city around you awakens, the streets become louder. Metalworkers begin striking glowing iron with rhythmic blows that echo between stone buildings. Street vendors call out today's freshest vegetables. Children weave between adults carrying baskets larger than themselves. Somewhere nearby, a priest prepares offerings at a neighborhood shrine while travelers arriving through the city gates bring news from provinces hundreds of miles away. Rome feels alive. Restless. Confident. Powerful. Its influence stretches across 3 continents. Its roads connect distant lands. Its ships carry grain from Egypt, wine from Gaul, olive oil from Hispania, and marble from Greece. People from every corner of the empire pass through these streets. Languages mix together. Cultures meet. Ideas travel astonishing distances. And yet, despite this vast empire surrounding you, your own world remains surprisingly close to home. For many Roman women, daily life revolved around family, neighbors, nearby markets, religious festivals, and the steady rhythm of household responsibilities. The empire expanded across seas. Your responsibilities expanded across rooms. That may sound limiting. Sometimes it certainly was. But Roman women were not simply passive figures standing quietly in the background of history. They advised relatives, managed estates, ran businesses, protected family wealth while husbands traveled, raised future politicians, influenced powerful men in ways official histories often ignored. Some became respected priestesses. Others earned remarkable reputations for intelligence, generosity, or determination. History occasionally allowed their names to survive. Most names, however, disappeared completely. Tonight, as we walk slowly through these ancient streets together, our journey is not about emperors issuing commands from marble palaces. It is about those forgotten lives. the women who woke before sunrise, who balanced family expectations with endless responsibilities, who celebrated festivals, mourned losses, worried about children, prepared meals, managed homes, and quietly carried the weight of ordinary life in one of history's greatest civilizations. As the morning sun climbs a little higher over Rome's rooftops, your day is only just beginning. Soon, you'll discover that growing up as a Roman girl meant learning lessons that would shape every year of your life, lessons about family, duty, reputation, and expectations that could rarely be ignored. And with each passing hour, the city will reveal another reason why life here required a strength that many modern visitors might never expect. The city that never asked what you wanted. As the morning continues, the streets of Rome grow even louder. The peaceful stillness of dawn has disappeared beneath the constant rhythm of everyday life. Wooden wagon wheels rumble over worn stone roads. Shopkeepers pull open heavy shutters. Somewhere nearby, a blacksmith's hammer strikes hot iron with a steady ring that echoes through the neighborhood. If you stand quietly for a moment, you begin to notice something remarkable. This city never seems to stop moving. Nearly 1 million people may call Rome home during the height of the empire. That makes it one of the largest cities the ancient world has ever seen. People from Britain, Egypt, Syria, North Africa, Greece, and countless other provinces walk the same streets together. Different languages blend into a constant murmur. Exotic spices fill the air. Sailors unload cargo from distant ports while officials hurry toward government buildings carrying bundles of wax tablets. Rome feels like the center of the world. But for you, life is much smaller. Your world is measured not in provinces conquered or roads constructed, but in family expectations, household routines, and the reputation you are expected to protect every single day. That reputation is one of your most valuable possessions. Long before anyone asks about your talents, your opinions, or your dreams, they are likely to notice something else instead. Are you respectful? Are you modest? Do you bring honor to your family? In Roman society, these questions matter enormously. A family's reputation is shared. If one member behaves badly, everyone may feel the consequences. This places an enormous amount of pressure on daughters from an early age. Every public appearance, every conversation, every friendship can become a reflection of the household itself. It sounds exhausting. Because, quite honestly, it often was. Imagine leaving your home with your mother to visit the local market. The streets are crowded, but they are far from quiet or orderly. Merchants compete loudly for customers. Fish sellers proudly display their morning catch. Bakers stack fresh loaves still warm from the oven. Potters arrange rows of painted bowls and storage jars. Olive oil merchants carefully pour samples into small dishes while cloth traders unfold brightly dyed fabrics from every corner of the empire. The marketplace is filled with colors and voices. Yet even here, there are invisible rules. You are expected to carry yourself with dignity. People notice. Neighbors remember. And news travels through Rome with astonishing speed. Long before social media existed, gossip moved faster than a racing horse. If someone witnessed an embarrassing moment in the morning, another neighborhood might be discussing it by sunset. The Romans loved conversation. They also loved rumors. Sometimes those rumors were accurate. Very often, they were not. As a Roman woman, protecting your good name meant navigating a city where everyone seemed to know someone who knew someone else. You quickly learn that silence can be useful. Patience can be valuable. And choosing your words carefully may save you considerable trouble later. Of course, Rome is not entirely serious. Religious festivals fill the calendar throughout the year. Streets become decorated with flowers, music drifts through public squares, and temples welcome crowds bringing offerings to the gods. These festivals provide rare opportunities to step away from ordinary routines. Children laugh. Musicians perform. Families gather. Food is shared. For a little while, daily responsibilities seem lighter. The Romans celebrated many gods, believing divine powers influence nearly every part of life. Before important journeys, marriages, business agreements, or family decisions, prayers and sacrifices were common. Small household shrines stood inside many homes, where families honored protective spirits believed to watch over them. Religion was not simply something practiced occasionally. It was woven into everyday life. Before meals. Before travel. Before celebrations. Even before beginning certain kinds of work. To a modern visitor, it might seem unusual. To a Roman, it simply felt normal. As the afternoon sun grows warmer, another lesson becomes clear. Rome is a city of contrasts. Magnificent marble temples stand beside crowded apartment buildings. Elegant villas share neighborhoods with narrow alleyways where several families squeeze into tiny rented rooms. A wealthy woman may spend part of her day overseeing servants, reviewing household accounts, or arranging a dinner for distinguished guests. Only a few streets away, another woman carries heavy buckets of water upstairs several times before sunset because her building has no running water. Both women live in Rome. Both are Roman. Yet their daily lives are almost impossible to compare. This is an important truth that historians continue to emphasize today. There was no single Roman woman's experience. Wealth, family connections, citizenship, and social status shaped nearly everything. Some women enjoyed remarkable influence. Others struggled simply to survive another winter. As we continue our gentle walk through the city, the afternoon slowly begins giving way to evening. Shadows stretch across the streets. Oil lamps appear behind open windows. The smell of evening meals drifts through the neighborhoods, lentils simmering over charcoal fires, fresh bread, herbs, vegetables, olives, and, for fortunate families, perhaps a little fish or meat. Children are called indoors. Merchants count the day's earnings. Workers finally allow themselves a moment to rest. Even Rome, for all its endless energy, begins to slow. You return home knowing tomorrow will look surprisingly similar. There will be more chores, more expectations, more routines that quietly shape your future. Perhaps this sounds repetitive. In many ways, it was. But within those routines, Roman women found friendships, celebrated births, comforted grieving neighbors, laughed with family members, argued with relatives, and created lives that were far richer than surviving historical records sometimes suggest. History often remembers emperors because they changed the empire. Ordinary women changed families. And families, quietly and steadily, shaped Rome itself. As darkness settles over the rooftops and the last conversations fade into the evening air, your first day in ancient Rome comes to a peaceful close. You have begun to understand the world into which you were born, a world that offered beauty and opportunity to some, hardship and sacrifice to many, and expectations to everyone. Yet this is only the beginning. Tomorrow, your childhood truly begins. You will discover that growing up as a Roman girl was not simply about learning to read, play, or help around the house. Every lesson, every custom, and every expectation was preparing you for a future that others had already imagined long before you were old enough to imagine one for yourself. And that is where our journey continues, in the next chapter, as we explore why childhood in ancient Rome was never quite as carefree as we might hope. Childhood was never really yours. Learning your place before you learned your letters. The following morning arrives with a familiar chorus of footsteps echoing through the streets below. Before the sun has climbed above Rome's rooftops, the city is already awake once more. The smell of fresh bread drifts through open windows, mixed with wood smoke and the earthy scent left behind by the night's cool air. Yesterday, you discovered that Rome was a city of astonishing contrasts, a place where marble temples towered above crowded neighborhoods and where the empire's immense power rested upon the ordinary routines of millions of people. Today, your own story begins to take shape. Not as an adult. Not as a bride. Not even as someone expected to make important decisions. Today, you are simply a little girl growing up in ancient Rome. At first glance, childhood feels wonderfully ordinary. Your world is delightfully small. The courtyard outside your home seems enormous. Every loose stone becomes part of an imaginary adventure. A stray cat wandering between market stalls is suddenly the most fascinating creature in the empire. You collect smooth pebbles, chase birds across the square, and invent games with other children while adults remain busy discussing matters that appear terribly serious. Children, after all, have always been remarkably talented at finding joy in places adults hardly notice. For a little while, life belongs to laughter. Yet even during these carefree moments, the adults around you are quietly paying attention. Not because they wish to spoil your fun. Because they know something you do not. Childhood in Rome passes quickly. Very quickly. There is no clear dividing line between being a child and becoming useful. Long before you consider yourself grown, you will already be expected to contribute to the household. Perhaps your mother begins with simple tasks. She asks you to gather olives into a small basket after they have been sorted. You help fold freshly washed tunics before they are stored in wooden chests. You carry small clay lamps from one room to another as evening approaches. These jobs seem almost like games. No one expects perfection. Not yet. But every small task is quietly teaching you something. Responsibility. Patience. Attention. These are qualities admired throughout Roman society, especially in daughters. As the months become years, the lessons gradually become more complicated. You begin watching your mother more carefully than you realize. She rarely announces that she is teaching you. Instead, you simply observe. You notice how she carefully measures grain before grinding it into flour. How she checks bread while it bakes over glowing coals. How she stores olive oil in sealed jars to keep it fresh. How she plans meals depending upon what can be purchased that day. There are no recipe books resting on kitchen shelves. Knowledge travels from one generation to the next through careful observation. You learn by watching. Then by helping. Finally, by doing. Sometimes mistakes happen. Perhaps you spill water while carrying a heavy jug. Perhaps the bread bakes a little too long. Perhaps you accidentally tear a piece of cloth while trying to fold it. Most mothers understand that children learn through practice. Although, judging by some surviving Roman writings, a few mothers undoubtedly possess the magical ability to notice every tiny mistake from across the room. Certain parenting traditions appear to survive remarkably well across 2,000 years. If your family enjoys considerable wealth, your daily routine may look somewhat different. Servants prepare many meals. Household slaves perform demanding physical labor. Instead of completing every chore yourself, you learn how to supervise the household and understand how everything should be managed. This is not a life of complete leisure. A poorly managed Roman household could quickly become expensive, wasteful, and disorganized. An educated mistress of the house was expected to understand accounts, supplies, food storage, clothing, and servants' responsibilities. Even comfort required competence. If your family possesses fewer resources, there is little time for supervision. Everyone works. Even children. Rome is filled with workshops where entire families contribute together. The daughter of a potter may help polish finished bowls before they are sold. The daughter of a cloth merchant might spend hours winding thread or folding expensive fabrics for customers. Children living above bakeries wake before dawn because bread cannot wait for sleepy mornings. Those growing up beside blacksmiths learn the rhythm of hammers almost as naturally as birdsong. Work surrounds childhood. Not as punishment. Simply as life. Education follows a similar pattern. Modern classrooms filled with rows of desks would feel completely unfamiliar here. Some girls from wealthy families receive an excellent education. Private tutors may teach reading, writing, arithmetic, music, poetry, and even Greek literature, which educated Romans admired greatly. Learning to read opens remarkable opportunities. Books are rare and expensive. Letters connect distant relatives across the empire. Keeping household records requires careful writing. An educated woman can assist family businesses and manage property when necessary. Not everyone believes girls require extensive schooling. Many families think practical household skills matter far more than poetry or philosophy. After all, they reason, a daughter will eventually marry. Surely she should master weaving before speeches, cooking before rhetoric, managing servants before debating politics. Whether we agree with these priorities today is another matter entirely. But understanding them helps us understand Rome. Even among wealthy households, expectations remain clear. Education is useful. Character is essential. Parents hope their daughters become dependable, modest, intelligent, and respected within their communities. These qualities are discussed constantly. Not because Roman parents wish to limit their daughters' happiness, but because reputation could shape an entire family's future. Marriage negotiations, business partnerships, political friendships. All could be influenced by how a household was perceived. A daughter represented far more than herself. She represented generations before her and generations still to come. It is a considerable burden for someone still young enough to enjoy chasing butterflies across a garden. Fortunately, childhood still contains moments of simple happiness. During religious festivals, ordinary routines pause for celebration. Friends gather in courtyards. Children receive little treats. Families share stories after evening meals while flickering oil lamps cast dancing shadows against painted walls. Grandparents tell tales about brave heroes, clever gods, and mysterious creatures said to inhabit forests and rivers. Some stories are meant to entertain. Others gently encourage good behavior. A few are probably designed to persuade adventurous children that wandering away alone is an extraordinarily poor idea. Parents throughout history have demonstrated remarkable creativity whenever bedtime arrives. As another peaceful evening settles over Rome, you begin drifting towards sleep. You do not yet realize how carefully every ordinary day is preparing you for adulthood. The lessons hidden inside folded laundry, measured grain, polite greetings, and careful observation are slowly shaping the person you will become. For now, however, you are still a child. Tomorrow will bring another sunrise, another collection of small responsibilities, and another opportunity to learn something new. But before long, childhood itself will begin slipping quietly away, replaced by expectations that arrive much sooner than any young Roman girl could ever wish. Preparing for a future that was already planned. As another morning dawns over Rome, the rhythm of your childhood has become familiar. You wake to the sound of neighbors greeting one another through open windows, merchants calling to early customers, and the distant clatter of wagon wheels crossing the city's stone streets. It is a comforting rhythm now, almost like the steady beat of a heart. Yesterday, your lessons were small. Today, they begin to carry greater meaning. You are growing older. Not old enough to think of yourself as an adult, of course. You still laugh with friends in the courtyard, race after pigeons that stubbornly refuse to be caught, and occasionally lose yourself in stories told by grandparents on quiet evenings. But the adults notice the passing years. And in Rome, they rarely let those years go to waste. One afternoon your mother sits beside a basket overflowing with soft wool freshly washed and combed. Sunlight pours into the room, illuminating tiny fibers that float gently through the air like drifting feathers. She smiles and pats the empty stool beside her. It is time to learn another skill. At first, spinning wool seems surprisingly difficult. Your fingers refuse to cooperate. The thread breaks far more often than it stays together. One moment it is too thick, the next impossibly thin. You sigh with frustration while your mother quietly repairs each mistake without the slightest hint of annoyance. She has done this thousands of times before. Perhaps she remembers making the very same mistakes herself. Roman clothing did not simply appear in market stalls ready to wear. For countless families, cloth represented weeks of careful labor. Wool had to be cleaned, spun into thread, woven into fabric, dyed if the family could afford it, cut carefully, and finally sewn together. Every garment represented patience. Every cloak, tunic, blanket, or shawl carried the work of many steady hands. As you practice day after day, your movements become smoother. Your fingers learn a rhythm of their own. The thread no longer snaps quite so often. Without realizing it, you are becoming more capable. These lessons are not only about cloth. They are teaching persistence. Rome admired people who could quietly continue working, even when tasks became repetitive or difficult. That was fortunate, because many Roman chores were exactly that. Repetitive. The floors need sweeping again. The bread must be baked again. The lamps require fresh oil again. Water must be carried again. If history has one recurring theme, it is this: there has always been another bucket waiting to be filled. Fortunately, Roman families also understood the importance of companionship. Work was rarely done in complete silence. Women chatted while spinning wool. Neighbors exchanged news while drawing water from public fountains. Children listened carefully, pretending not to pay attention, while adults discuss marriages, harvests, business, politics, and occasionally the latest neighborhood gossip. You begin to understand that conversation is almost another household tool. News travels from one family to another without written announcements. Someone's son has joined the army. A merchant has returned safely from Alexandria. A neighbor's daughter has become engaged. Another family has welcomed a new baby. Rome is vast, but every neighborhood feels surprisingly close-knit. People notice when someone is absent. They celebrate together. They mourn together. Life is shared. Of course, not every lesson takes place inside the home. Sometimes your father invites you to accompany the family to religious festivals or public celebrations. Although men dominate political life, festivals belong to the whole community. The streets seem transformed. Garlands decorate doorways. Musicians play lively melodies. The smell of roasted food fills the air. Children weave happily through the crowds while adults pause to greet old friends. For a little while, even the busiest citizens seem willing to slow their pace. You watch priests perform ancient rituals with careful precision. Offerings are placed before the gods. Prayers are spoken for health, prosperity, and protection. You may not understand every word yet, but you understand the feeling. These ceremonies remind everyone that family, community, and tradition are deeply connected. As the years pass, another change becomes noticeable. Adults begin speaking differently when you enter the room. Conversations suddenly pause. Your parents exchange thoughtful glances. Relatives ask questions that seem oddly specific. Has she grown taller? She learns quickly. She is becoming quite responsible. At first, these remarks seem harmless. You barely notice them. But your mother notices. Your father notices. An older relative certainly notice. Because they are beginning to think about your future. Marriage in ancient Rome often arrived much earlier than it would for most people today. Families considered practical matters carefully. Good character. Respectable reputation. Connections between households. Financial stability. These subjects become part of ordinary conversation long before you imagine yourself wearing a wedding veil. No one asks whether you have planned your future. More often, your future is something quietly discussed around you. To modern ears, this may sound unsettling. Many historians believe it often was. Yet within these expectations, Roman girls still built close friendships, developed talents, laughed with siblings, and found moments of happiness in ordinary life. History is rarely entirely joyful. Nor is it entirely miserable. It exists somewhere in between. As evening approaches once more, your family gathers for the day's final meal. Simple clay lamps flicker against painted walls. Fresh bread is broken and shared. Perhaps there are olives, vegetables, lentils, cheese, and fruit if the season has been kind. Your father speaks about business in the forum. Your mother quietly plans tomorrow's work. You listen more than you speak. Not because your thoughts have no value, but because children are expected to observe before they participate. It is another lesson. Listen carefully. Learn patiently. Speak thoughtfully. Outside, the noise of Rome gradually softens. Shopkeepers close their shutters. The last customers leave the market. The streets that bustled all day finally begin to rest beneath the warm Mediterranean night. You look toward the stars above the city, unaware that childhood is already beginning to slip through your fingers. The games become fewer. The responsibilities become greater. Soon, another chapter of life will begin, one that countless Roman girls faced with equal parts excitement, uncertainty, and very little choice. For before long, your family will decide that you are no longer simply a child. They will decide it is time to prepare for marriage. And in ancient Rome, that preparation could begin far earlier than any modern visitor might ever expect. Married before you were ready. When childhood quietly came to an end. The stars above Rome slowly fade as another morning begins. A soft golden light spreads across the rooftops, touching temple columns, crowded apartment blocks, and the tiled courtyards where yesterday's laundry now hangs dry in the gentle breeze. The city is waking once again. Bakers are already tending their ovens. Merchants are arranging baskets of fruit and vegetables. Water splashes into public fountains while sleepy children rub their eyes and prepare for another day. But for you, something feels different. Yesterday, you were still being treated as a child. Today, the adults seem to be looking at you in another way. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Simply, differently. The conversations become quieter whenever you enter the room. Your mother and father exchange thoughtful glances across the dinner table. An aunt smiles knowingly before asking how quickly you have grown. Even neighbors begin making comments that sound innocent enough. She'll make a fine wife one day. Time certainly flies. Has anyone spoken to the family of Marcus? You don't entirely understand what they mean. But the grown-ups certainly do. In ancient Rome, childhood was never meant to last forever. Especially for girls. By modern standards, Roman girls often married remarkably young. While the exact age varied depending on family, wealth, and historical period, it was not unusual for marriages to be arranged during the teenage years, especially among elite families. For many ordinary Romans, practical circumstances sometimes delayed marriage, but the expectation remained the same. Marriage was not viewed primarily as a romantic adventure. It was a family decision, a partnership between households, a promise that strengthened alliances, protected property, secured inheritances, and continued family traditions. Love, when it appeared, was considered a welcome blessing. It simply was not always the first consideration. That idea may feel strange today. Yet to the Romans, it seemed perfectly sensible. Families had survived for generations by thinking beyond individual wishes. They believed stability benefited everyone. Whether young brides always agreed was another question entirely. As you continue helping around the house, these quiet discussions become more frequent. Your mother begins teaching you responsibilities with greater care than ever before. Preparing meals is no longer just practice. It is preparation. Managing household supplies is no longer a game. It is training. Even the way you greet visitors becomes important. A respectful greeting reflects well upon the entire family. You begin to notice that your clothing has also changed. Gone are some of the simpler garments of early childhood. Your tunics fit differently now. Your hair is arranged more carefully. Small details that once seemed unimportant suddenly receive considerable attention. Presentation matters. Not because beauty alone is admired. Because appearance reflects discipline, respectability, and family honor. Roman society places extraordinary value upon these qualities. Meanwhile, life around you continues as it always has. The forum remains crowded with politicians, merchants, lawyers, and travelers. Children still chase one another through narrow streets. Temple bells and religious ceremonies mark the passing weeks. The empire itself seems unchanged. Yet your own world has quietly shifted. One afternoon, while helping your mother spin wool beside an open doorway, visitors arrive. Nothing about their appearance seems unusual. They exchange polite greetings. Accept cups of watered wine. Discuss the weather. Comment on this year's olive harvest. For nearly half an hour, the conversation sounds wonderfully ordinary. Until you realize something. They are not really talking about olives, or weather, or wine. They are discussing families. Quietly. Carefully. Respectfully. You understand only fragments. A son. A household. Good character. Reliable reputation. Property. Connections. Future. The words drift through the room like pieces of a puzzle slowly fitting together. No one has officially announced anything. No decision has been made. Yet everyone seems aware that your future is becoming a topic of conversation. Except perhaps you. Your mother notices your puzzled expression. Later that evening, after the visitors have gone, she gently explains that families often discuss possible marriage arrangements years before any wedding actually takes place. There is no urgency in her voice. Only calm acceptance. To her, this is simply how life has always worked. She herself may have experienced something very similar. Generations before her almost certainly did. You listen quietly. Part of you feels curious. Another part feels uncertain. Marriage still seems impossibly far away. You still enjoy listening to stories told by your grandparents. You still laugh with neighborhood friends. Surely adulthood cannot arrive so quickly. But Rome measures time differently. Life expectancy is shorter than in the modern world. families cannot assume endless years lie ahead. Responsibilities begin earlier. Adulthood arrives sooner. Every season seems to pass with surprising speed. As the weeks become months, your education also changes. The practical lessons continue. Cooking, weaving, household accounts, religious customs, hospitality. These skills are no longer taught merely because they are useful. They are becoming essential. A Roman household depends upon organization. Food must last through changing seasons. Servants, if there are any, require supervision. Guests deserve proper hospitality. Religious rituals should be observed correctly. Children, one day, will need guidance. The role awaiting you is enormous. Far larger than you had imagined while chasing birds across the courtyard only a few years ago. Yet there are still moments when childhood quietly returns. Perhaps your younger brother challenges you to a game. Perhaps cousins visit during a festival. Perhaps you laugh so hard at a family gathering that everyone forgets, for just a little while, the serious conversations about the future. Those moments become precious, because they grow fewer each year. As the sun slowly disappears behind Rome's rooftops, casting long golden shadows across the city, you begin to sense that life is changing. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Like the slow movement of the seasons. Almost too gradually to notice. Tomorrow will look much like today. The ovens will be lit before sunrise. Merchants will fill the streets. Neighbors will exchange greetings. The city will continue exactly as it always has. But within your own home, preparations have quietly begun. The path before you is becoming clearer, whether you chose it or not. And before long, Rome will celebrate one of the most important days in your life, a wedding unlike anything most modern people have ever experienced. A wedding day that changed everything. The days pass almost unnoticed. One sunrise blends gently into the next, just as it always has. The familiar sounds of Rome continue outside your window. Bakers light their ovens before dawn. Merchants call to passing customers. Children laugh in narrow streets while neighbors greet one another over shared walls. At first, everything appears exactly the same. But inside your home, small changes begin to gather like clouds before a gentle rain. Your mother spends more time speaking with relatives. Your father receives visitors more frequently. Conversations pause whenever you enter the room, only to begin again after you leave. Eventually, there is no longer any mystery. A marriage has been arranged. No dramatic announcement fills the house. No orchestra begins to play. Instead, the news arrives quietly, almost matter-of-factly, as though everyone except you had expected this day for years. In truth, many of them probably had. Your parents explain that the young man comes from a respectable family. His relatives are known throughout the neighborhood. They have a stable household, good character, and enough resources to provide a comfortable future. These qualities are listed one after another with careful confidence. Whether he tells amusing stories, whether he snores loudly, whether he forgets where he leaves his sandals. These details, unfortunately, are not included in the discussion. History has many strengths. Comprehensive husband reviews were not among them. If your family belongs to Rome's wealthier classes, formal agreements may be written, discussing dowries and property arrangements. A dowry: money, land, household goods, or valuable possessions provided by the bride's family helps support the new household and reflects the union between two families. For poorer families, the arrangements are usually simpler. There are fewer possessions to exchange. But the meaning remains the same. Marriage is not only about two people. It is about two households becoming connected. As the wedding day approaches, your mother begins helping you prepare. She carefully folds garments into wooden chests. She points out useful household tools you may one day need. She shares advice passed down from her own mother, and perhaps from generations before that. Some advice is practical. Keep grain dry. Never leave oil lamps burning unattended. Treat guests kindly. Plan ahead for winter. Some advice is gentler. Be patient. Listen carefully. Do not allow small disagreements to become lasting ones. You notice that her voice grows softer during these conversations. Perhaps she remembers leaving her own childhood home many years earlier. Perhaps she understands exactly how uncertain you feel. The evening before your wedding, your room feels strangely different. Everything is familiar. Yet nothing feels quite the same. You look around at the walls that have surrounded your childhood. The small window overlooking the street. The wooden chest where your favorite belongings are stored. The corner where you once played games with your younger siblings. Tomorrow, you will no longer wake here. It is a surprisingly emotional thought. Ancient Roman writers often described weddings as joyful occasions, filled with celebration and religious ceremony. They certainly were. But beneath the celebration must also have been quieter emotions. Hope. Uncertainty. Excitement. Nervousness. Perhaps even a little fear. Those feelings belong to people in every century. The morning finally arrives. Before sunrise, the household is already busy. Relatives fill every room. Neighbors arrive carrying gifts or good wishes. The air smells of fresh bread, flowers, olive oil, and burning incense offered to the household gods. Your clothing today is unlike anything you wear on ordinary mornings. A white tunic is fastened carefully. Around your waist, a special woolen belt is tied in a symbolic knot. Your hair is arranged with great care according to Roman custom, divided into sections in a style associated with brides. Finally, a bright veil is placed over your head. Its warm color glows gently in the morning light. You scarcely recognize your own reflection. The ceremonies begin. Prayers are offered. Blessings are spoken. Family members exchange smiles that are equal parts happiness and quiet emotion. Hands are joined. Promises are witnessed. The marriage is recognized before family, friends, and the gods. Afterward comes celebration. Food fills long tables. Bread, olives, fruit, cheese, vegetables, roasted meats for those who can afford them, and plenty of watered wine for the adults. Musicians play cheerful melodies. Children weave happily between the guests, more interested in sweets than solemn ceremonies. Laughter echoes through the courtyard. For a few hours, the worries of ordinary life seem wonderfully distant. Then, gradually, the celebration begins to fade. This is the moment every bride has quietly known was coming. You leave your childhood home. Relatives embrace you one final time. Your mother straightens your veil. Your father offers a few last words, perhaps practical, perhaps affectionate, perhaps both. You step outside. The streets of Rome feel different now. Not because the city has changed. Because you have. You walk toward the household that will become your new home. Every doorway you pass seems to mark another step away from childhood. It is not a long journey through the city. Yet emotionally, it feels enormous. When you finally cross the threshold of your husband's house, ancient customs welcome you into this new chapter of life. From this day forward, you are expected to help manage an entirely different household. New routines. New relatives. New responsibilities. The familiar comfort of childhood has been replaced by something much larger. Marriage in ancient Rome is not the end of your story. In many ways, it is only the beginning. Tomorrow there will still be bread to bake, lamps to fill, accounts to organize, guests to welcome, and countless ordinary tasks that keep a Roman home alive. You will soon discover that being a wife requires far more than a beautiful wedding ceremony. It demands patience, resilience, careful judgment, and an astonishing amount of work. As the sun sets beyond the rooftops of Rome and the excitement of the day slowly gives way to peaceful evening, you take one final look back at the life you have left behind. Childhood is over. A new home awaits. And with it comes another chapter in your journey, one that will reveal why running a Roman household was a full-time responsibility, whether you lived in a grand marble villa or a modest apartment tucked away in the bustling heart of the Eternal City. Running a Roman household. The work that never truly ended. The celebrations of your wedding are now behind you. The laughter of relatives has faded into memory, the music has grown quiet, and the excitement that filled the previous day has settled into something much calmer. As darkness gave way to dawn, you discovered an important truth about life in ancient Rome. A wedding lasts a day. Running a household lasts every day after. The first morning in your new home begins before the sun has fully risen. For a few peaceful moments, everything is still. The city outside has not yet reached its usual chorus of shouting merchants and rattling wagons. A cool breeze drifts through the open window, carrying the faint scent of damp stone, olive trees, and the smoke of the first kitchen fires being lit across the neighborhood. You lie quietly, listening. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows. A dog barks. Someone draws water from a nearby fountain, the steady splash echoing through the narrow streets. Rome is waking once again. Only now, it is no longer your childhood home that wakes around you. This house is different. The walls are unfamiliar. The arrangement of rooms is slightly different. Even the creaking floorboards seem to have their own voice. Yesterday, you were a daughter learning from others. Today, people expect you to become one of the women responsible for keeping this household running smoothly. It is a role that carries far more responsibility than you first imagined. Your mother-in-law, if she still lives within the household, greets you warmly but with careful attention. She has managed this home for many years and understands every corner of it better than anyone. She knows which storage jars contain the freshest grain. She knows which servant can be trusted to finish a task without reminders. She knows exactly how much olive oil the family uses during an ordinary week. At first, you mostly observe. There is far more to learn than you expected. Every Roman household, whether rich or poor, depends upon planning. Food cannot simply appear whenever someone becomes hungry. There are no shops open at every hour of the day. No delivery carts arriving with forgotten ingredients. Every purchase requires thought. Every meal requires preparation. The grain stored in clay jars must remain dry. Olive oil must be protected from contamination. Wine must be kept safely sealed. Cheese spoils if neglected. Fresh vegetables last only so long beneath the Mediterranean sun. One careless mistake could waste valuable food that took weeks to acquire. It is easy for a modern visitor to underestimate these ordinary responsibilities. Today, we often think of history through its greatest events. Wars, emperors, triumphs, political speeches. Yet ordinary Roman life depended far more upon something much less dramatic. Someone had to remember whether enough flour remained for tomorrow's bread. Someone had to notice when the lamp oil was running low. Someone had to make certain there would still be food after the next market day. That someone was often a woman. If your household belongs to a wealthy family, several enslaved workers or servants may assist with cooking, cleaning, carrying water, or maintaining the home. Contrary to what some imagine, this does not mean your responsibilities disappear. Instead, they change. Managing people is work of its own. You learn who works carefully and who needs encouragement. You discover that kindness often earns greater loyalty than endless shouting. Although, like households in every century, you also learn that no amount of careful planning can entirely prevent someone from accidentally breaking an expensive clay jar at the worst possible moment. Some challenges, it seems, are timeless. If your family is less fortunate, there are no servants waiting for instructions. Every task belongs to the family itself. Before breakfast, someone has already swept the floor. Someone has carried water from the public fountain. Someone has gathered firewood or charcoal. Someone has prepared the morning meal. More often than not, that someone includes you. The work begins early. It finishes late. And tomorrow it begins again. As the morning continues, you accompany another member of the household to inspect the storeroom. Large clay jars line the walls. Each contains something important. Grain, beans, olives, dried herbs, salt, perhaps a little honey if the family can afford such a luxury. Everything is counted. Nothing is wasted. Romans understood scarcity far better than abundance. A poor harvest, a delayed shipment, or rising prices could affect an entire season. Careful management is not merely good habit. It is survival. Outside, the streets have become busy once more. From the doorway you watch merchants passing with baskets balanced across their shoulders. Children weave confidently between donkeys pulling heavily loaded carts. Neighbors pause to exchange news before continuing toward the market. The city feels wonderfully alive. For a brief moment, you wonder whether life outside these walls might be more exciting than the endless rhythm of household responsibilities. Then you smile to yourself, because you are beginning to understand something your mother quietly tried to teach you years ago. The household is not separate from Rome. It is part of Rome. Every loaf of bread baked inside these walls feeds someone who will later build roads, argue legal cases, serve in the army, or trade goods across the empire. Every clean tunic prepared here allows another day's work to begin. Every carefully managed meal keeps the family healthy enough to meet tomorrow's challenges. History often celebrates those who stood in the forum delivering famous speeches. It speaks far less about the people who made sure those speakers had breakfast first. By midday, your confidence has grown just a little. You remember where certain supplies are stored. You know which room catches the afternoon heat. You recognize the familiar sounds of this new home. It is still not quite yours, but it is becoming familiar. Like every Roman woman before you, you are learning not through grand ceremonies or dramatic lessons, but through countless ordinary moments repeated day after day. And with each passing sunrise, those ordinary moments slowly become the foundation of an extraordinary life. As evening approaches and the warm light of the setting sun paints Rome's rooftops in shades of gold, you realize that tomorrow will bring another list of responsibilities. There will be water to fetch or supervise, grain to measure, meals to prepare, visitors to welcome, and countless small decisions that no historian would ever think to record. Yet together, those unnoticed tasks keep one of history's greatest civilizations alive. Tomorrow, you will leave the house and step into the lively markets of Rome, where bargaining, shopping, weaving, and the endless rhythm of daily work reveal another side of what it truly meant to be a Roman woman. Markets, meals, and the endless rhythm of the day. The following morning begins much like the last. Long before the streets fill with the familiar bustle of Rome, the household is already stirring. A servant quietly opens the wooden shutters to welcome the cool morning air. If your family has no servants, someone in the house has already risen to light the cooking fire, carefully coaxing yesterday's glowing embers back to life. You have started to notice something comforting about Roman mornings. They follow a rhythm. The rhythm rarely changes. And perhaps that is exactly what makes life feel steady. There is grain to measure, bread to prepare, water jars to inspect, oil lamps to refill after the previous evening. The work is so familiar now that your hands often know what to do before your mind has fully awakened. As the first meal of the day comes to an end, another responsibility awaits. The market. No Roman household, regardless of wealth, could simply forget about food for weeks at a time. Fresh vegetables, fruit, fish, herbs, eggs, and countless other necessities needed regular attention. Even wealthy families, with storerooms full of grain and olive oil, depended on the constant flow of merchants who supplied the city. So you wrap a light shawl around your shoulders and step outside. The streets of Rome greet you with their usual energy. Sunlight spills between rows of buildings, illuminating the worn stone roads polished smooth by generations of footsteps. Donkeys patiently carry heavy baskets toward the forum. Water sellers call out to thirsty travelers. Bakers display fresh loaves whose warm aroma drifts through the air, making it nearly impossible to walk past without slowing your pace. If history had included an official competition for the most irresistible smell, fresh Roman bread would surely have been among the finalists. The marketplace is already alive. Merchants proudly display colorful vegetables harvested only hours earlier. Olives glisten in large wooden bowls. Bundles of herbs fill the air with the scent of rosemary, thyme, and mint. Fish sellers loudly insist that their catch is the freshest in all of Rome, a claim that neighboring fish sellers seem equally confident belongs to them. Some traditions, it seems, never disappear. As you move through the market, you begin to understand why experience matters. Buying food is not simply a matter of handing over coins. You compare prices. You examine the quality of fruit. You ask where the olive oil came from. You judge whether the grain appears dry enough for storage. A careless purchase could mean spoiled food within days. A wise purchase might feed the household for an entire week. These are decisions no one notices when they are made correctly. Yet everyone notices when they are made poorly. Returning home, the work continues without pause. Fresh food must be sorted. Some vegetables are prepared immediately. Others are carefully stored. Herbs are hung to dry. Grain is checked once again for insects or dampness. Nothing is left to chance. The Roman household runs on preparation rather than convenience. Modern kitchens are filled with machines that save time. Ancient Roman kitchens relied on something much older: patience. Cooking itself demands constant attention. There are no temperature dials to adjust. No timers to ring politely when dinner is ready. The charcoal fire must be watched carefully. Too much heat burns the bread. Too little leaves it half-baked. Large bronze pots simmer slowly while wooden spoons stir lentils, beans, onions, and vegetables into nourishing stews. If the family is prosperous, there may be fish, chicken, or pork on special occasions. For many ordinary Romans, however, meat is an occasional luxury rather than a daily expectation. Bread, olive oil, vegetables, cheese, and pulses form the foundation of most meals. Simple. Filling. Dependable. As the afternoon sun reaches its highest point, another task calls for your attention. Clothing. Garments wear out surprisingly quickly in a busy household. Torn seams must be repaired. Loose threads trimmed. Buttons, where used, replaced with careful stitching. Wool cloaks are brushed clean. Tunics are folded neatly into wooden chests scented with dried herbs to discourage insects. You smile as you remember the countless hours your mother spent teaching you to spin wool. At the time, those lessons felt endless. Now they feel invaluable. Every skill learned in childhood has quietly followed you into adulthood. Perhaps that was your mother's plan all along. Visitors arrive unexpectedly during the afternoon. Hospitality is deeply valued in Roman culture. Whether the guests stay for an hour or only a few minutes, refreshments are offered whenever possible. Water. Wine diluted with water. Bread. Olives. Fruit when available. A welcoming household earns respect throughout the neighborhood. Reputation, once again, quietly shapes everyday life. As evening approaches, the pace finally begins to slow. The day's final meal is prepared. Family members gather together. Stories are exchanged about events in the forum. News arrives from distant provinces. Someone laughs about an unusually stubborn mule that refused to move all morning. Even after a long day of work, there is still room for conversation. Perhaps this is one of the quiet secrets of Roman life. The work is demanding, sometimes exhausting, but it is shared. Families eat together. Neighbors visit one another. Children listen while pretending not to listen. Grandparents repeat familiar stories that somehow become entertaining every single time. The city outside gradually softens. Shopkeepers close their stalls. The sounds of wagons grow less frequent. Oil lamps cast a warm golden glow across the walls of your home. You finally allow yourself to sit. Only for a little while. Tomorrow, the same rhythm will begin again. More shopping. More cooking. More planning. More work that history rarely celebrates but without which Rome itself could never have flourished. As you watch the gentle flame of the nearest oil lamp flicker in the growing darkness, another thought quietly enters your mind. You have spent weeks learning how to care for a household. Soon, society will expect you to care just as carefully for yourself. Your appearance, your clothing, your hairstyle, and even the smallest details of personal grooming will become another reflection of your family and your place within Roman society. And so, with the city settling peacefully beneath the evening sky, we leave the kitchen, the storeroom, and the marketplace behind. Our journey continues into a different world altogether, a world of mirrors polished from bronze, elaborate hairstyles, delicate perfumes, fine fabrics, and beauty rituals that demanded remarkable patience. There, you will discover why preparing to leave the house could sometimes take almost as much effort as running the house itself. Beauty was serious business. Every hair in its proper place. As the evening fades into night, the last oil lamps flicker softly throughout your home. Outside, Rome grows quieter with each passing hour. The merchants have packed away their stalls, the blacksmith's hammer has finally fallen silent, and even the city's ever-present wagons have become little more than distant memories. You drift peacefully to sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring another familiar rhythm. Another sunrise. Another list of responsibilities. Another ordinary day in one of the greatest cities the ancient world has ever known. When morning arrives, sunlight filters gently through the shutters, casting thin golden lines across the room. The air is pleasantly cool for now, although everyone knows the afternoon heat will soon settle over the city. You rise quietly. The household has already begun its daily routine. Breakfast is simple, as it often is. A little bread, perhaps some cheese, olives, or fruit if the season has been generous. It is enough to begin the day, though certainly not the extravagant feast that modern films sometimes imagine. Before turning your attention to the household, however, there is another task waiting. Preparing yourself. To someone visiting ancient Rome for the first time, this might seem like the easiest part of the morning. Wash your face. Comb your hair. Put on your clothes. Surely it cannot take very long. Rome, as you are beginning to discover, rarely does anything quite so simply. Appearance matters. Not because every Roman expects impossible perfection, but because your clothing and grooming quietly communicate something about your family, your household, and your respect for those around you. A clean tunic suggests careful management. Neatly arranged hair reflects discipline. Well-maintained clothing hints that the household itself is organized. It is another reminder that in Rome, reputation is woven into the smallest details of daily life. Your first task is washing. Without modern plumbing inside most homes, this is not always as convenient as one might hope. Water must already have been carried from a nearby fountain or collected earlier in the day. Every drop has value. You wash your face carefully using cool water. Perhaps a little olive oil is used to remove dirt before being gently scraped away with a curved metal tool known as a strigil, although this method is more commonly associated with bathing. Soap, as we know it today, is not part of the ordinary Roman morning. Instead, cleanliness depends upon water, oil, cloths, and careful routine. Your hair, however, requires considerably more attention. Roman women took great pride in their hairstyles. Simple styles certainly existed, especially among working families who had little time for elaborate arrangements. But among wealthier households, hairstyles could become astonishingly complex. Braids wrapped around the head. Rows of carefully arranged curls. Intricate knots held in place with decorative pins carved from bone, ivory, or polished metal. Some styles required so much patience that wealthy women often relied upon enslaved hairdressers whose entire responsibility was arranging every strand with remarkable precision. One misplaced curl might mean beginning again. It is enough to make even the calmest person question every decision that led to this particular hairstyle. Fortunately, most ordinary Roman women preferred something rather more practical. Even so, keeping long hair clean, healthy, and neatly arranged demanded regular care. Loose hair was uncommon for respectable married women in public. Order mattered. Just as the household reflected discipline, so too did personal appearance. As you carefully arrange your own hair before a polished bronze mirror, you notice how imperfect the reflection appears. Bronze mirrors are beautifully crafted but hardly crystal clear. The image shimmers slightly, making every adjustment something of an educated guess. Perhaps this explains why Roman women developed considerable patience. Or perhaps they simply became accustomed to trusting skilled hands more than uncertain reflections. Once your hair is finished, attention turns to clothing. Unlike the brightly colored costumes often shown in popular entertainment, everyday Roman clothing is usually practical. A well-made tunic forms the foundation of most outfits. Married women commonly wear a longer garment known as the stola, symbolizing their respected status within society. Over this, you may drape a cloak called a palla when leaving the house, both for warmth and modesty. The fabrics vary enormously depending upon wealth. Fine wool is common. Linen appears during warmer months. Silk, imported from distant lands at extraordinary expense, remains a luxury available only to the wealthiest members of Roman society. Its cost is so remarkable that many ordinary Romans could scarcely imagine owning even a small piece. Jewelry follows similar rules. A simple bronze bracelet. A silver ring. Perhaps a necklace passed carefully from mother to daughter. For wealthy women, pearls, emeralds, sapphires, and finely crafted gold become symbols of status. For everyone else, beauty is found in neatness rather than extravagance. It is an important distinction. Rome admires elegance. It also values moderation. As you prepare to leave the house, you realize that dressing well is not merely about pleasing others. It reflects pride in yourself, respect for your family, and awareness of the society in which you live. Every carefully folded garment, every neatly braided lock of hair, every polished shoe, they all tell a quiet story before a single word is spoken. Stepping outside into the bright Roman morning, you join countless other women walking toward markets, temples, workshops, and family visits. Some are dressed in simple undyed wool. Others wear richly colored fabrics that catch the sunlight beautifully. Some walk beside servants. Others carry heavy baskets themselves. Their lives differ greatly. Yet almost all have taken the time to present themselves with care. It is another unspoken language of Rome. One understood without explanation. As you continue along the busy streets, admiring the extraordinary variety of people who call this city home, you cannot help but wonder how they achieve such polished appearances. The answer, as you are about to discover, involves perfumes from distant provinces, cosmetics made from surprising ingredients, and beauty routines that could occupy far more time than most modern visitors would ever expect. Perfumes, cosmetics, and the price of elegance. As you continue your walk through the lively streets of Rome, the morning sun climbs steadily higher above the city. The cool air that greeted you at dawn has given way to a pleasant warmth, and the marketplace hums with the familiar sounds of another busy day. Merchants call cheerfully to passing customers. Children weave through the crowd with remarkable confidence. Donkeys patiently carry heavy loads, apparently convinced that humans are forever inventing new reasons to transport baskets from one side of the city to the other. Some things, it seems, never change. After admiring the beautifully arranged stalls filled with fresh bread, fruit, and pottery, your attention is drawn toward another part of the market. Here, the air smells completely different. Instead of warm bread and herbs, delicate fragrances drift between the shops. Sweet rose, earthy myrrh, frankincense from distant lands, lavender, cinnamon. Exotic spices that have traveled hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles before reaching the heart of Rome. The Roman Empire stretches across vast territories, connecting people from Britain to Egypt and from Hispania to Syria. Merchant ships cross the Mediterranean carrying far more than grain and wine. They also bring precious perfumes, oils, cosmetics, rare dyes, and luxurious goods that wealthy Romans eagerly purchase. To many people, perfume is not simply a pleasant luxury. It is a symbol of refinement. A small ceramic bottle, carefully sealed with wax, may contain fragrant oils worth a considerable amount of money. Only a few drops are needed. A little fragrance is considered elegant. Too much, however, might earn raised eyebrows or playful comments from friends. The Romans appreciated moderation in many things. At least in theory. In practice, some wealthy citizens clearly believed moderation was a suggestion rather than a rule. As you continue through the market, you stop before a cosmetics stall. Small containers line the wooden shelves. Powders, creams, colored pigments, tiny bronze spoons for mixing ingredients. Unlike the modern beauty counters filled with neatly labeled bottles, Roman cosmetics are often prepared from natural materials gathered from across the empire. Some ingredients sound wonderfully pleasant. Rose petals, olive oil, honey, beeswax. Others are rather less comforting. Certain white face powders contain lead. Although Roman women had no way of knowing it, repeated use of lead-based cosmetics could slowly damage their health. At the time, however, pale skin was fashionable among many wealthy Romans because it suggested that a woman spent less time working beneath the hot Mediterranean sun. Beauty, throughout history, has often demanded sacrifices. Not all of them wise. Cheeks might be given a touch of color using red pigments. Eyes could be outlined with dark powders similar to kohl, helping them appear larger and more expressive. Eyebrows were carefully shaped. Even eyelashes received attention. It becomes clear that many Roman women devoted considerable effort to presenting themselves well before stepping into public view. This was not always about vanity. Appearance reflected social expectations. A well-groomed woman demonstrated care, discipline, and respectability. Especially among Rome's upper classes, personal presentation became another language through which families displayed their status. Jewelry tells a similar story. As you pass another merchant, sunlight catches a display of delicate gold earrings. Pearls rest upon soft cloth beside carved gemstones imported from distant provinces. Some necklaces sparkle brilliantly despite being crafted nearly 2,000 years ago. Goldsmiths in Rome are extraordinarily skilled. Their work transforms simple pieces of metal into objects admired across the empire. Of course, such treasures remain beyond the reach of most families. An ordinary Roman woman may own only a few cherished pieces. Perhaps a simple ring, a modest bracelet, a brooch fastening her cloak. These possessions are carefully protected and often passed from mother to daughter, carrying memories alongside their material value. The wealthiest women enjoy wardrobes filled with beautifully dyed garments. Purple, the most famous and expensive color in Rome, remains astonishingly costly because its dye is produced from tiny sea snails collected along Mediterranean shores. Creating enough purple dye for a single garment requires an enormous number of shells and countless hours of labor. Little wonder that the color becomes associated with wealth, power, and prestige. Most ordinary Romans never wear true imperial purple. They admire it from afar. As midday approaches, you visit the public baths. Despite popular imagination, Roman baths are not reserved only for wealthy citizens. Many ordinary people visit regularly, making them important centers of daily life. The baths offer much more than cleanliness. Friends meet there. Business discussions take place. News spreads rapidly from one conversation to another. For women, designated bathing times or separate facilities often provide opportunities to relax, socialize, and momentarily escape the endless responsibilities waiting at home. Warm rooms soothe tired muscles. Steam fills the air. Water splashes gently against marble pools. Attendants offer oils for cleansing the skin. For a short while, the worries of household management seem wonderfully distant. Eventually, however, even the most peaceful bath comes to an end. You dress once more, gather your belongings, and begin the familiar walk home. The streets remain busy, but your pace is slower now. You have spent the day exploring a side of Roman life often hidden behind stories of emperors and armies. You have learned that beauty in Rome is not merely decoration. It is communication. Every carefully braided hairstyle, every neatly arranged garment, every polished piece of jewelry, every drop of perfume. Each tells the world something about the person wearing it and the household she represents. Yet as important as appearance may be, another responsibility soon overshadows every other expectation placed upon Roman women. It is a responsibility far greater than elegant clothing or carefully arranged curls. It carries hope, joy, fear, and considerable danger. As evening settles gently across Rome, you return home beneath a sky glowing with shades of gold and amber. The familiar sounds of family life greet you once again, and the comforting aroma of supper drifts from the kitchen. Tomorrow, your journey will lead you into one of the most uncertain chapters of a Roman woman's life. For sooner or later, nearly every married woman is expected to become a mother. And in the ancient world, bringing new life into the world was an act of extraordinary courage, one that carried risks impossible to ignore. That is where our story continues next, as we discover why pregnancy and childbirth were among the greatest challenges a Roman woman could ever face. Pregnancy was dangerous. Waiting for a child in ancient Rome. The evening passes quietly. The lamps burn lower with each passing hour until, one by one, they are gently extinguished. Outside, Rome finally rests. The bustling markets are silent, the workshops have closed their doors, and even the restless dogs that roam the narrow streets seem content to curl up for the night. You drift into sleep knowing that tomorrow will be much like yesterday. Or so you think. Life has a curious habit of changing without announcing itself. Sometimes the greatest turning points arrive not with trumpets or cheering crowds, but with the smallest of signs. A little more tired than usual. A meal that suddenly no longer smells quite as appealing. A morning when your favorite bread seems strangely uninteresting, while a bowl of olive somehow becomes the most fascinating thing in the kitchen. Your mother might smile knowingly. An older neighbor may quietly exchange a glance with another woman. Long before anyone says the words aloud, they begin to suspect what is happening. You may be expecting a child. In ancient Rome, this news is greeted with genuine joy. Families celebrate the possibility of new life. A child means the continuation of the household, another generation to care for aging parents, preserve family traditions, and carry the family name into the future. For wealthy families, children help secure inheritances and strengthen alliances. For poorer families, they become additional helping hands as they grow older. To the Romans, children are both a blessing and a necessity. Yet beneath the happiness lies something rarely spoken aloud. Fear. Modern medicine has transformed pregnancy into something far safer than it was in the ancient world. Roman families possessed remarkable practical knowledge gathered over generations, but they did not understand bacteria, blood types, antibiotics, or the many hidden complications that doctors recognize today. Every pregnancy carried uncertainty. Every family knew someone who had experienced tragedy. Perhaps a sister, a cousin, a neighbor. Stories were remembered for years. Because survival could never be taken for granted. As the weeks pass, your daily routine begins to change. You still help manage the household, but the older women around you become increasingly protective. Do not lift that basket. Sit down for a while. Someone else can carry the water. Whether every piece of advice is medically helpful is another matter entirely. Human history suggests that whenever someone becomes pregnant, advice appears almost magically from every direction. Ancient Rome is certainly no exception. Some recommendations are practical. Rest when possible. Eat nourishing food. Avoid unnecessary strain. Others are rooted in tradition rather than science. Protective charms may be hung inside the house. Prayers are offered to the gods, especially to Juno Lucina, the goddess associated with childbirth. Small offerings appear at household shrines as family members quietly ask for a safe pregnancy and a healthy child. Faith becomes a source of comfort, even when certainty remains impossible. As your body changes, so too does your place within the household. Relatives begin discussing names. Neighbors smile more warmly. Older women share stories about their own children. Some remember joyful moments. Others remember difficult labors that lasted through entire nights. You listen carefully. Some stories reassure you. Others, perhaps not quite as much. Fortunately, everyday life does not disappear. Rome continues exactly as it always has. The Forum remains crowded. Ships continue arriving from distant provinces. Merchants argue over prices. Children chase one another through dusty streets. The empire never pauses simply because one family is waiting for a baby. There are still meals to prepare, though perhaps others now insist on helping more often. There are still garments to mend and household accounts to organize. Life moves forward one ordinary day at a time. During the warmer afternoons, you may spend more time sitting in the shaded courtyard, enjoying a welcome breeze while spinning wool or talking quietly with neighbors. These conversations often become some of the most comforting moments of the day. The women gathered around you have lived through experiences that no book could fully capture. One remembers the excitement of hearing her baby's first cry. Another quietly recalls a child she lost years ago. A grandmother smiles as she tells stories about grandchildren who now run through the same streets where their parents once played. Their voices carry both happiness and sorrow. Such is the nature of family life. As you listen, you begin to understand something important. Roman women formed communities of remarkable strength. While official histories often celebrate generals and emperors, ordinary women supported one another through births, illnesses, grief, celebrations, and the countless challenges of daily life. Much of that support was never recorded. Yet it helped families endure for generations. As the months pass, preparing for the baby's arrival becomes another household responsibility. Tiny garments are sewn from soft wool. Blankets are folded neatly into wooden chests. A small cradle may be repaired or borrowed from relatives whose children have already grown. Nothing is wasted. Everything has a purpose. Every stitch carries hope. You find yourself imagining the future. Will your child inherit your husband's eyes? Will they laugh often? Will they one day run through these same courtyards chasing pigeons just as you once did? These are gentle thoughts. Comforting thoughts. They help pass the long weeks of waiting. Yet beneath those hopeful dreams remains the quiet knowledge shared by every family in Rome. The hardest part still lies ahead. No amount of preparation can entirely remove the uncertainty of childbirth. No carefully woven blanket can guarantee safety. No prayer can promise a particular outcome. All anyone can do is prepare as best they can and hope. As evening falls once more over the eternal city, the familiar glow of oil lamps fills your home with warm, flickering light. Outside, Rome continues its endless rhythm. Inside, your own world has become wonderfully, and somewhat nervously, focused on a single question. When the time finally comes, will everything be all right? That question will soon be answered. For the day of childbirth is approaching, bringing with it one of the greatest tests a Roman woman could ever face, a moment requiring courage, endurance, and the support of everyone around her. And that is where our journey continues in the next part of our story. The longest day. The weeks pass with surprising speed. At first, each day seemed to stretch on forever, marked only by the familiar rhythm of preparing meals, tending the household, and quietly wondering what the future might bring. Then, almost without warning, the waiting begins to feel very short indeed. Your child will soon arrive. As another peaceful evening settles over Rome, the air is warm and still. The last rays of sunlight paint the rooftops in soft shades of gold before slowly fading into deep blue. Neighbors finish their evening meals, merchants secure their shops, and families gather around glowing oil lamps to exchange stories about the day. Inside your home, everything appears calm. Blankets have already been folded. Tiny garments are neatly stored. The cradle waits patiently in the corner of the room. There is nothing more to prepare. Only time remains. That night, sleep comes lightly. You wake several times, adjusting your position, listening to the quiet sounds of the house around you. Somewhere before dawn, something feels different. At first, it is only a faint discomfort. Easy to dismiss. Perhaps you have simply slept awkwardly. But before long, another sensation follows. Then another, the older women in the household notice almost immediately. One quietly rises from her bed. Another lights an oil lamp. Someone is sent to fetch the midwife. No one panics. There is no shouting. Only calm, practice movement. For generations, Roman midwives have helped bring children safely into the world. Many possess years of practical experience passed down from teacher to apprentice, mother to daughter, or through countless births attended across the city. Although they lack the scientific knowledge available to modern medicine, their experience earns deep respect. When the midwife arrives, she greets the family with reassuring confidence. She asks simple questions. She observes carefully. She prepares the room as best she can. Warm water is heated. Clean cloths are gathered. Small stools and cushions are arranged where they may be needed. The household itself seems to hold its breath. Outside, however, Rome continues almost completely unchanged. The first bakers are already lighting their ovens. Water sellers begin their morning rounds. Donkeys pull loaded carts toward the forum. A senator hurries to an important meeting. Children chase one another through narrow streets, laughing without the slightest idea that, inside one ordinary house, an entirely different kind of struggle is unfolding. It is a curious thought. The world rarely stops for our most important moments. As the hours pass, labor becomes increasingly difficult. You focus on each breath. The women surrounding you offer quiet encouragement. One places a cool cloth against your forehead. Another holds your hand. Someone whispers prayers to Juno Lucina, asking once again for a safe delivery. There are no powerful pain medicines. No brightly lit operating rooms. No machines quietly measuring heartbeats. Only skilled hands. Patient voices. Experience. And hope. Roman childbirth often took place with the mother in an upright or seated position rather than lying flat. Some women used specially designed birthing stools that allowed gravity to assist during labor, while the midwife carefully guided the delivery. It is exhausting work. Hours seem to lose their meaning. Morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon slowly drifts toward evening. Between each wave of pain comes a brief moment of quiet. You gather your strength. Then continue once more. It is impossible not to admire the courage of the countless women who endured this experience throughout history. Their names may never appear in marble inscriptions. Poets rarely celebrated them. Generals certainly did not dedicate triumphal arches to them. Yet every emperor, philosopher, merchant, soldier, and senator who ever lived began life in a room much like this one. That thought deserves a quiet moment of appreciation. Eventually, after what feels like the longest day of your life, everything changes. A baby's first cry fills the room. For one brief heartbeat, no one moves. Then smiles spread across tired faces. The tension that has quietly filled the house begins to melt away. Relatives embrace one another. Someone laughs through happy tears. Another offers thanks to the household gods. The tiny child is carefully wrapped in soft woolen cloth. For the first time, you hold this new life in your arms. The room, only moments ago filled with worry, now feels astonishingly peaceful. The journey, however, is not quite over. Both mother and child remain vulnerable during the days that follow. Rest becomes essential. Neighbors visit with food. Relatives offer assistance. Experienced women help with feeding, bathing, and comforting the newborn while allowing you time to recover. Their support reminds you once again that Roman families rarely faced life's greatest challenges entirely alone. There is another custom that quietly follows the birth. Several days later, if the child has remained healthy, a naming ceremony takes place. Family and close friends gather once more, though this celebration is gentler than a wedding feast. The child officially receives a name, marking an important step into family and community life. Small gifts may be offered. Prayers are spoken. Hope fills the household once again. As evening falls after the ceremony, you sit quietly beside the cradle. The baby sleeps peacefully. The tiny rise and fall of each breath seems almost miraculous. Outside, Rome continues its endless rhythm. Merchants bargain. Ships arrive from distant provinces. Temple bells ring. The empire carries on, scarcely aware that one more citizen has entered its vast and complicated world. You smile gently. Life will never be quite the same again. Your days will now revolve around tiny hands, sleepless nights, first words, first steps, and countless ordinary moments that will one day become treasured memories. Motherhood has changed everything. Yet beyond the walls of your home, another side of Roman life still awaits your discovery. There are lively public baths where neighbors gather to exchange news, bustling festivals that fill the streets with music and laughter, and markets where friendships are strengthened through everyday conversation. As your strength slowly returns and your child grows a little older, you will once again step beyond your front door. Our journey will continue there, exploring the social life of Roman women and discovering how markets, baths, festivals, and neighborhood gossip brought the great city of Rome to life in ways that history books often overlook. Markets, baths, and gossip. Stepping back into the world. Several months have passed since your child's birth. The long nights are becoming a little less exhausting. The tiny bundle who once seemed content to sleep only in the shortest of moments now rests for longer stretches, allowing the household to settle into a new rhythm. Life, once again, begins to feel familiar. Not easier. Simply familiar. As another morning dawns over Rome, pale sunlight slips through the shutters and falls gently across the cradle beside your bed. Your child is still asleep, wrapped snugly in a soft woolen blanket that you stitched together before the birth. For a moment, you remain perfectly still. The house is unusually quiet. No merchants are calling outside yet. No wagons are rattling across the stone streets. Even the birds seem reluctant to disturb the peaceful silence. It is a rare gift. Soon enough, the city will awaken. And, as always, so will your responsibilities. You rise quietly, careful not to wake the baby. The familiar morning routine begins almost without thought. The cooking fire is coaxed back to life. Bread from yesterday is served alongside olives and a little cheese. Water jars are checked. Oil lamps are extinguished after burning through the night. The tasks have become second nature. Months ago they felt overwhelming. Now they flow together like the steady current of a river. Perhaps that is one of life's quiet mysteries. The work itself changes very little. It is we who slowly become stronger. Your child finally wakes with a soft cry that echoes gently through the room. There is feeding to do. Comforting. Rocking. Smiling. You quickly discover that babies possess an extraordinary ability to demand complete attention at precisely the moment you thought you had finished your chores. Historians may debate the rise and fall of empires. Babies remain blissfully uninterested in such discussions. Eventually the household settles once more, and today offers something unusual. You are leaving the house. Not for an emergency. Not for a religious ceremony. Simply to visit the market and, if time allows, the public baths with a trusted friend. It feels surprisingly exciting. You wrap your palla neatly over your shoulders, ensuring your clothing is arranged carefully, just as your mother taught you years ago. One final glance around the room confirms everything is in order before you step into the bright Roman morning. Immediately, the city welcomes you with familiar energy. The streets seem alive in every direction. A baker removes steaming loaves from his oven while the irresistible smell drifts across the neighborhood. Potters display freshly fired bowls that catch the sunlight with warm shades of red and brown. Fruit sellers carefully arrange figs, apples, and grapes into neat piles, hoping beautiful displays will encourage generous customers. Somewhere nearby, a mule decides that standing perfectly still in the middle of the road is an excellent contribution to Roman transportation. Its owner appears to disagree. The marketplace grows busier with every passing moment. Women from every corner of the neighborhood arrive carrying woven baskets beneath their arms. Some come from wealthy villas accompanied by servants. Others have walked from crowded apartment buildings balancing children on one hip while carrying shopping with the other. Although their circumstances differ greatly, they all share the same purpose. Every household needs food. Every family must eat. As you move between the stalls, you begin greeting familiar faces. The vegetable seller remembers which herbs you usually buy. The baker asks politely about your new baby. A neighbor smiles warmly before introducing you to a cousin visiting from Ostia. Rome may be enormous, but neighborhoods often feel remarkably close. People notice one another. They remember birthdays, weddings, illnesses, and new children. News spreads naturally through conversation rather than written announcements. One woman mentions that a merchant recently returned safely from Alexandria after a successful voyage across the Mediterranean. Another has heard that grain shipments arrived earlier than expected this season. Someone else quietly wonders whether a senator's daughter may soon become engaged. No one claims absolute certainty. Everyone seems happy to discuss the possibility. Gossip, you begin to suspect, is one of Rome's oldest public services. It costs nothing. Everyone contributes. No one admits to enjoying it. Yet somehow everyone knows the latest stories. Of course, not every conversation concerns rumors. Much of it is wonderfully ordinary. Recipes are exchanged. Children's mischievous adventures are described with affectionate laughter. Neighbors recommend trustworthy craftsmen or complain about sandals that wore out far too quickly. These simple conversations strengthen the invisible bonds holding the community together. In a city approaching 1 million people, such friendships matter greatly. You stop beside a merchant selling beautifully woven baskets. His craftsmanship reminds you of your own household, where every storage jar, woven cloth, and wooden chest serves a practical purpose. Nothing here exists simply for decoration. Even beauty often has work to do. As the sun climbs higher, the market becomes increasingly crowded. Street musicians begin playing cheerful melodies near the forum. Children chase one another around a fountain despite repeated instructions to slow down. A pair of philosophers debate loudly enough that nearby shoppers appear to receive an unexpected education with every purchase. You smile quietly. Rome truly contains every kind of person imaginable. Merchants, soldiers, teachers, craftsmen, sailors, priests, foreign travelers, and women like yourself, whose lives quietly hold countless households together while history often looks elsewhere. By late morning, your basket is comfortably full. Fresh vegetables, a small piece of cheese, olive oil, perhaps a little honey as a rare treat. The household will eat well for several days. But your morning is not yet over. Your friend gently suggests continuing toward one of Rome's greatest public gathering places. The baths. There, surrounded by warm water, marble halls, and lively conversation, you will discover another side of Roman daily life, one where relaxation, friendship, and community meet beneath vaulted ceilings filled with steam. warm waters and whispered conversations. Leaving the busy marketplace behind, you and your friend make your way through a maze of familiar streets. The morning sun has climbed higher now, warming the stone walls that line the narrow lanes. Shopkeepers continue calling to customers, children dart between adults with endless energy, and somewhere in the distance a musician plays a gentle tune on a reed pipe. Your basket is pleasantly heavy with the day's shopping. Fortunately, home can wait a little longer. Today, you have something that many Roman women treasured whenever time allowed. A chance to visit the baths. To a modern visitor, the phrase public baths might suggest nothing more than a place to wash. The Romans would have found that description surprisingly incomplete. The baths were among the busiest and most important public spaces in the empire. People came not only to bathe but also to meet friends, exchange news, discuss business, exercise, relax, and escape, if only briefly, from the endless rhythm of daily responsibilities. In many cities, separate bathing times or separate facilities allowed women and men to bathe without sharing the same spaces. The exact arrangements varied across the Roman world, but wherever you lived, a visit to the baths offered something precious. Time. As you approach the entrance, the building itself is impressive. High stone walls surround a spacious complex filled with echoes of laughter and conversation. Marble columns support broad roofs, while sunlight pours through carefully placed openings above. Decorative mosaics cover sections of the floor, depicting dolphins, fish, sea creatures, and playful scenes from mythology. Even after seeing them many times, you cannot help but admire the craftsmanship. Rome certainly knew how to build. Inside, attendants greet familiar visitors with friendly smiles. Some carry folded towels. Others tend the heating systems hidden beneath the floors, where ingenious Roman engineers circulate hot air through hollow spaces to warm entire rooms. It is an astonishing achievement. Long before modern central heating, the Romans had already discovered ways to make winter mornings considerably more comfortable. Your friend smiles knowingly. "This is the best part of the week," she says. You suspect she may be right. The two of you begin in a warm room, allowing your bodies to adjust gradually before moving into hotter chambers. The air grows pleasantly humid. Steam rises gently around polished stone benches. Conversations drift lazily through the room, never hurried, never shouted. For the first time in many days, there is nowhere you urgently need to be. No grain to measure. No bread to bake. No floor to sweep. No storage jars demanding inspection. The household, remarkably enough, seems capable of surviving an hour without your constant supervision. It is a comforting discovery. Nearby, groups of women sit together talking quietly. One proudly introduces her newborn daughter to old friends. Another seeks advice about a stubborn cough troubling her youngest son. A grandmother laughs while describing her energetic grandson, who apparently believes climbing furniture is an essential life skill. Some experiences, you realize, have changed very little over 2,000 years. As you settle onto a warm stone bench, the conversations naturally expand beyond family matters. News travels quickly here. A merchant recently returned from Egypt with unusually fine linen. Repairs have finally begun on a section of road damaged during winter storms. Someone claims an actor at yesterday's theatrical performance forgot half his lines. Another insists the audience applauded anyway. Whether out of kindness or confusion remains delightfully uncertain. Of course, there is also gossip. No Roman gathering would seem entirely complete without at least a little speculation. A wealthy household has purchased an extravagant new villa. A senator is rumored to be arguing with his political allies. A neighbor's son has fallen hopelessly in love with a baker's daughter. Whether every story is true is almost beside the point. The conversations themselves strengthen friendships. They remind everyone that they belong to a community. You notice something else as you look around the room. The baths bring together women from many different walks of life. A prosperous merchant's wife sits beside the daughter of a craftsman. An elderly widow chats comfortably with a young mother. A visitor from another province asks for directions to a nearby temple, and several women eagerly offer advice all at once. For a little while, differences in wealth and status seem less important than shared experience. Everyone understands the demands of running a household. Everyone knows what it means to worry about children. Everyone appreciates an opportunity to rest tired feet. Eventually, you and your friend move into a cooler pool. The water is refreshing after the warmth of the steam rooms. Gentle ripples spread across the surface as people enter and leave, speaking softly so their voices echo pleasantly beneath the high ceilings. You close your eyes for a brief moment. It feels wonderfully peaceful. Outside these walls, Rome remains one of the busiest cities on Earth. Inside, time seems to slow. Perhaps that explains why the baths became so beloved. They offered something almost impossible to find elsewhere. A pause. Not from life, but within it. Too soon, however, it is time to return home. The household still waits. Children will soon be hungry. Evening meals require preparation. Laundry never seems to wash itself, despite what every optimistic Roman may have secretly hoped. You collect your belongings, thank the attendants, and step back into the bright afternoon sunshine. The streets are just as lively as before. Vendors continue calling out prices. Temple bells sound in the distance. The aroma of roasting meat drifts from a nearby tavern. Rome has carried on quite happily without you for a few hours. As you walk home beside your friend, your conversation becomes quieter. You realize that the market and the baths have offered something more valuable than shopping or relaxation. They have reminded you that even in a city of nearly 1 million people, no one truly lives alone. Friendships ease burdens. Shared laughter softens difficult days. Kind words make ordinary work feel lighter. And those quiet connections often become just as important as food, shelter, or fine clothing. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting Rome's rooftops with warm shades of amber and gold, you feel refreshed. Tomorrow will bring new responsibilities, as it always does. But before long, another challenge awaits, one far more complicated than choosing vegetables at the market or sharing stories in the baths. You are about to discover that love, loyalty, family expectations, and public reputation could shape a Roman woman's life in ways both joyful and deeply complicated. Love, loyalty, and scandal. Matters of the heart and the household. The peaceful afternoon at the baths gradually becomes another pleasant memory. As you return home through Rome's winding streets, your basket is lighter than it was that morning, but your thoughts are pleasantly full. The conversations, the laughter, the familiar faces, and the comforting warmth of the baths have reminded you that even in a city as vast as Rome, friendships make everyday life a little easier. By the time you reach your front door, the familiar rhythm of the household is already waiting. The cooking fire needs tending. Your child reaches eagerly toward you with tiny outstretched hands. Someone has misplaced a wooden spoon. No one can quite remember where. After a brief search, it is discovered exactly where such objects have a remarkable habit of hiding. In the hands of a curious toddler. History has preserved many speeches by Roman senators. It says surprisingly little about toddlers stealing kitchen utensils. A most unfortunate oversight. As evening settles over the city, your family gathers for supper. The meal is simple but satisfying. Fresh bread, olives, a warm stew prepared from lentils and vegetables. Perhaps a little fish purchased at the market if fortune has been especially kind this week. Conversation drifts comfortably from one subject to another. A neighbor's successful harvest. News arriving from distant provinces. The latest repairs being made to a section of the city's aqueduct. Nothing seems particularly extraordinary. Yet beneath these ordinary conversations lies something quietly shaping every Roman household. Relationships. Not merely between husbands and wives, but between parents and children. Neighbors. Relatives. Friends. Patrons. Clients. Rome is a city held together as much by personal connections as by stone roads. Marriage, as you have already discovered, is often arranged with practical considerations in mind. Love may grow over time. Sometimes it grows quickly. Sometimes more slowly. Occasionally it refuses to grow at all. Human hearts, then as now, rarely follow predictable rules. Many Roman writers left thoughtful observations about marriage. Some praised devoted husbands and loyal wives whose partnerships lasted decades. Others joked that married life required endless patience. A few suggested that patience alone might not always be sufficient. Roman humor, it appears, could be surprisingly familiar. As the years pass, you gradually come to know your husband better. The awkwardness of your earliest days together slowly disappears. You learn which foods he enjoys most. He learns that you prefer beginning household preparations before sunrise rather than rushing through them later. You discover small habits that would have seemed impossible to predict on your wedding day. Perhaps he always leaves his sandals in precisely the wrong place. Perhaps you quietly reorganize the kitchen whenever someone else puts things away. These tiny disagreements are hardly unusual. Every household develops its own collection of harmless mysteries. Fortunately, affection often grows from sharing ordinary days rather than extraordinary adventures. There are evenings spent talking quietly after the child has fallen asleep. There are festivals enjoyed together beneath colorful decorations. There are difficult seasons when poor harvests force careful planning, followed by happier years when the storerooms remain comfortably full. Life slowly weaves two separate stories into one shared household. Yet Roman society also places enormous emphasis upon loyalty. A wife's faithfulness is expected and publicly admired. Her reputation reflects directly upon the honor of both families joined through marriage. Respectability matters deeply. Neighbors observe. Relatives remember. Stories travel astonishingly quickly through the streets of Rome. A single careless remark may be repeated several times before sunset, growing slightly more dramatic with each telling. You have already learned that gossip flourishes wherever people gather. Now you begin to understand why so many Roman families guarded their reputations with such care. For women especially, public opinion could influence friendships, family alliances, and future opportunities for children. This may seem unfair by modern standards. Many historians would agree. Yet understanding these expectations helps us understand the world in which Roman women lived. Fortunately, loyalty was not measured only by avoiding scandal. It was also found in quieter moments. Caring for an ill family member. Managing the household wisely while your husband traveled on business. Comforting frightened children during thunderstorms. Supporting elderly parents as they grew weaker with age. These acts rarely appeared in official records. No triumphant procession marched through the forum to celebrate a well-organized pantry or a patiently comforted child. Yet these quiet acts of devotion formed the foundation upon which Roman families depended. One afternoon, while visiting a neighbor for a shared meal, conversation turns toward a wealthy household across the city. Someone claims the husband has taken an interest in another woman. Another insists the story has been greatly exaggerated. A third confidently announces that her cousin's friend's uncle knows the entire truth. No one can explain exactly how. You smile politely and continue eating your bread. Some mysteries are perhaps best left unsolved. Even in ancient Rome, it seems wise to treat dramatic rumors with gentle skepticism. As the afternoon fades into evening, you walk home beneath a sky painted with soft shades of orange and pink. The city feels peaceful. Children play their final games before being called inside. Merchants close heavy wooden shutters over their shops. The familiar smell of evening meals drifts through every neighborhood. Your own home welcomes you with comforting familiarity. The child runs eagerly to greet you. Your husband is already preparing to help with the evening meal. Oil lamps soon cast their warm glow across the room. You realize that the strongest households are not built upon grand gestures alone. They are built upon thousands of small acts of trust repeated day after day. Kindness, patience, reliability. These are the quiet foundations of family life. Tomorrow, however, you will discover that not every Roman marriage followed such a peaceful path. For despite Rome's admiration for loyalty and stability, disagreements, separations, and even divorce were part of Roman society. And the stories surrounding them could become some of the most talked about conversations in the entire city. When love changed and life went on. As another morning arrives, the first golden light spreads gently across the rooftops of Rome. The city wakes in its familiar way, almost as though nothing has changed since yesterday. Bakers knead fresh dough, shopkeepers lift heavy wooden shutters, and the fountains once again become gathering places for neighbors beginning another ordinary day. Inside your home, life follows its comfortable rhythm. Your child is growing quickly now, curious about everything within reach. Every basket becomes a hiding place. Every wooden spoon becomes a treasured possession. Every carefully organized shelf somehow manages to become slightly less organized by the end of the afternoon. It is a talent possessed by children in every century. You smile as you quietly return the household to order, remembering how your own mother once did exactly the same. The years continue to pass. Your marriage, like many others in Rome, settles into familiar routines. Some days are joyful, filled with laughter and successful harvests. Others bring disagreements over household expenses, worries about illness, or the ordinary frustrations that come from sharing a life with another person. The Romans understood something that still feels true today. A lasting marriage is built far more often in ordinary moments than in extraordinary ones. Yet not every household found lasting peace. As you visit the market one morning, familiar conversations drift through the crowd. A merchant's daughter has recently become engaged. A young couple welcomed their second child. Then, in quieter voices, another story begins to circulate. A respected family is separating. No one seems especially shocked. Only curious. To many modern people, divorce may seem like a surprisingly modern idea. Ancient Rome, however, tells a rather different story. Although marriage was highly valued, divorce was legally possible and became increasingly common during certain periods of Roman history, particularly among wealthier families. Sometimes husbands initiated it. Sometimes wives did. In many cases, marriages ended not because of dramatic betrayal but because relationships, family circumstances, or political ambitions changed. That does not mean divorce was easy. Far from it. Families discussed property. Dowries often had to be returned, either fully or in part, depending on the circumstances. Children's futures required careful consideration. Relatives became involved. What happened inside one household rarely stayed inside one household for very long. Once again, reputation quietly stood at the center of everything. As you continue shopping, two elderly women nearby begin debating the latest rumor with great confidence. The husband was impossible. No, replies the other, it was the wife's family. A third woman joins them. I heard neither of those stories is true. Within moments, all three seem equally certain of completely different versions of the same event. You decide there is little to be gained by asking for further details. History teaches many valuable lessons. One of them is that gossip often grows faster than facts. Returning home, you find yourself reflecting on your own marriage. It has not always been perfect. There have been disagreements, misunderstandings, days when exhaustion made everyone less patient than usual. Yet there have also been countless quiet moments that no neighbor could ever fully understand. Shared laughter after the evening meal. Comfort offered during illness. Working side by side through difficult seasons. Watching your child take those uncertain first steps across the courtyard. These ordinary memories rarely become public stories. Perhaps that is exactly what makes them precious. Roman writers often praised the ideal of the devoted wife, faithful, wise, modest, and dedicated to her household. In return, many also admired husbands who treated their wives with respect and trusted them to manage family affairs, especially during long absences. Reality, of course, was more complicated. Some marriages were affectionate partnerships. Others were strained by money, politics, ambition, or incompatible personalities. Ancient people, you are beginning to realize, were not so different from us after all. They hoped. They worried. They argued. They forgave. Sometimes they succeeded. Sometimes they did not. Later that afternoon, your family gathers for a religious festival honoring the household gods. Neighbors bring small offerings. Children laugh as they play games in the courtyard. Older relatives tell familiar stories that everyone has heard dozens of times and still somehow enjoys hearing again. Looking around, you notice something quietly reassuring. Strong communities survive not because every family is perfect. They survive because people continue supporting one another despite life's difficulties. A widow receives help carrying heavy water jars. A young mother is given fresh bread by a neighbor whose oven is already warm. An elderly man is invited to join another family's evening meal. Small kindnesses appear everywhere once you begin looking for them. Perhaps these quiet acts matter more than the dramatic stories historians usually preserve. As dusk settles over Rome, you walk slowly through the streets toward home. The air carries the comforting scent of wood smoke and freshly baked bread. Oil lamps begin glowing behind open windows. Somewhere in the distance, music drifts gently through the evening from a nearby celebration. Your child walks beside you now rather than being carried, occasionally stopping to inspect an unusually interesting stone or chase a determined pigeon across the road. You cannot help but smile. Time moves quietly. Children grow. Parents grow older. The city changes one generation at a time while somehow remaining wonderfully familiar. As you step across your threshold and close the wooden door behind you, another peaceful evening begins. You have learned that love in ancient Rome was rarely as simple as poetry suggested. It demanded patience, compromise, loyalty, sometimes forgiveness, and always a willingness to continue building a shared life through countless ordinary days. Yet beyond the walls of your home, another truth about Rome still waits to be explored. Not every Roman woman lived as you have. Some enjoyed magnificent villas filled with servants and luxury. Others struggled in cramped apartments where every day was a challenge simply to find enough food and clean water. Their worlds existed within the same city. Yet they could hardly have been more different. Rich women versus poor women. Two lives in the same city. As another peaceful evening settles over Rome, you close the wooden shutters against the cooling night air. The household grows quiet. Your child has finally drifted off to sleep after insisting that one more story was absolutely necessary, and the last oil lamp flickers softly beside the family shrine. Outside, the eternal city is never completely silent. Somewhere, a cart still rattles across the stone streets. A dog barks in the distance. Late travelers make their way home beneath the gentle glow of the moon. Rome seems to breathe even while it sleeps. You rest, knowing that tomorrow will begin as so many others have, with bread to prepare, water to carry or supervise, and another ordinary day waiting patiently outside your door. When dawn finally arrives, the city awakens with familiar confidence. The first rays of sunlight strike the rooftops of temples and apartment buildings alike. Smoke curls upward from hundreds of kitchens as families prepare their morning meals. The streets gradually fill with merchants, laborers, senators, craftsmen, soldiers, and servants, each beginning another day beneath the same Roman sky. Yet as you step outside, you begin to notice something you had rarely considered before. Not everyone experiences this city in the same way. Rome is one city, but it contains many different worlds. Imagine beginning your morning in one of the grand villas owned by a wealthy senatorial family. The house itself surrounds an elegant open courtyard where sunlight dances across a shallow pool. Marble columns support covered walkways decorated with painted walls and carefully tended gardens. The air smells faintly of flowers rather than smoke, and somewhere nearby, a small fountain provides the gentle sound of flowing water throughout the day. Servants are already awake. One prepares breakfast. Another sweeps the courtyard. A third checks supplies brought by merchants earlier that morning. The mistress of the house rises knowing that much of the physical labor has already begun without her lifting a single heavy water jar. At first, this sounds wonderfully relaxing. And in many ways, it certainly is. Yet comfort brings responsibilities of its own. A wealthy Roman woman may oversee dozens of enslaved workers, each with different duties throughout the household. She keeps track of food stores, clothing, household accounts, visiting guests, repairs to the property, and preparations for dinners where influential families gather to discuss politics, business, and society. A poorly managed villa could quickly become chaotic. Leadership, even in luxury, requires attention. Now imagine another woman waking only a few streets away. She lives not in a spacious villa but in an insular one of Rome's crowded apartment buildings. Her family occupies a small rented room several floors above the street. There is no peaceful garden. No marble fountain. No servants quietly preparing breakfast. Instead, she wakes before sunrise because every task must be done by her own hands. She descends several flights of narrow wooden stairs carrying empty water jars, hoping to reach the public fountain before a long line forms. By the time she climbs back upstairs, each step feels a little steeper than the last. You begin to appreciate just how heavy water can become. Especially when gravity insists on being particularly uncooperative. Breakfast is simple. Bread. Perhaps olives. Maybe a little cheese if the week's earnings have been good. Luxury is measured not by elaborate banquets but by whether everyone eats enough before beginning another day's work. The apartment itself presents constant challenges. Many insulae are built quickly to house Rome's growing population. Upper floors are often cramped and less sturdy than the lower levels. During summer, the rooms become uncomfortably hot. During winter, cold winds slip through cracks in the walls. Fire is an ever-present danger. Most homes rely on open flames for cooking, heating, and lighting. In densely packed neighborhoods, one careless accident can spread with frightening speed. Roman writers occasionally complained about these crowded apartment buildings, and it is not difficult to understand why. Life here demands resilience. As you continue walking through the city, these two very different worlds appear side by side. A richly dressed woman leaves her villa accompanied by servants carrying baskets and shaded by attendants. Nearby, another woman balances laundry, groceries, and a sleepy child while carefully avoiding muddy patches left by yesterday's rain. Both are Roman women. Both care deeply for their families. Both worry when children become ill. Both hope tomorrow's harvest will be generous. Their daily realities, however, could scarcely be more different. The wealthy woman may spend part of her afternoon reading poetry, supervising tutors educating her children, or receiving visitors in beautifully decorated rooms. The poorer woman may spend those same hours spinning wool, selling goods in the marketplace, washing clothing, or helping her husband in a family workshop. One manages abundance. The other manages scarcity. Neither life is entirely free from difficulty. That realization surprises you. Money certainly makes many hardships easier. It cannot remove every worry. Wealthy families fear political rivalries, changing fortunes, and public scandal. Poorer families worry about food prices, illness, and whether enough work will be available next week. Every household carries burdens. They simply weigh differently. As midday approaches, you pause in the forum, watching the endless flow of people moving through the city's heart. The contrast is impossible to ignore. Expensive robes brush past patched tunics. Fine leather sandals walk beside worn wooden shoes. Elegant jewelry catches the sunlight while laborious wipes sweat from tired faces. Rome is magnificent. Rome is unequal. Both statements are true. As the afternoon sun warms the great city, you continue your journey with fresh eyes. The woman living in the marble villa and the woman climbing 5 flights of stairs each morning rarely exchange places. Yet both leave their mark on Rome in quiet, ordinary ways. In the next part of our story, you will discover that despite their differences, these women shared surprising experiences raising families, enduring hardships, celebrating festivals, and finding moments of joy in a city that belonged to them both. And perhaps, by the end of their stories, you will realize that history is not only shaped by emperors and armies, but by millions of ordinary women whose names have long since faded from memory. Different fortunes, shared lives. The afternoon sun hangs high above Rome, warming marble temples and crowded rooftops alike. From where you stand near the Forum, the city seems endless, a maze of villas, workshops, apartment buildings, markets, bathhouses, and temples stretching farther than the eye can comfortably follow. A cool breeze carries the mixed scents of fresh bread, olive oil, wood smoke, and distant incense from a nearby shrine. The city is alive. Yet the more closely you observe it, the more clearly you see that Rome is really many cities woven together into one. You leave the busy square and follow a broad street lined with impressive homes. Behind tall walls lie elegant gardens where birds sing among carefully trimmed shrubs. Marble statues stand quietly beside sparkling fountains. Painted dining rooms display colorful scenes from Greek mythology, while polished floors of tiny mosaic stones shimmer beneath the afternoon light. Inside one such villa, a wealthy Roman woman spends her day reviewing household accounts. A steward reports how much grain remains in storage. A servant asks permission to purchase fresh fish for an evening banquet. Another announces that guests from Pompeii are expected before sunset. Her responsibilities are real. She must organize a large household, oversee many workers, and protect the family's reputation. Yet she performs these duties from surroundings that offer comfort unknown to most Romans. Only a short walk away, another household tells a very different story. You climb the narrow wooden staircase of an apartment building. The stairs creak beneath every step. Children laugh somewhere above. A woman leans from a window, carefully shaking crumbs from a cloth before quickly apologizing to the unfortunate man below who nearly becomes part of breakfast himself. Life in an insula is crowded. Families often share walls so thin that they know when neighbors are arguing, laughing, singing, or attempting to persuade a stubborn child that bedtime is, in fact, unavoidable. Privacy is a rare luxury. Still, these homes are filled with life. A potter's wife shapes clay beside her husband. Across the hallway, another woman repairs worn tunics by the window where the light is strongest. An elderly grandmother tells stories while watching several children whose parents are working nearby. The rooms may be small, but they are rarely empty. As you continue through the neighborhood, you notice women contributing to family life in countless different ways. Some spin wool into thread. Others weave cloth on wooden looms. Many sell vegetables, fruit, bread, or handmade goods in local markets. Some assist in family businesses, keeping records while husbands negotiate with customers. A few run taverns or small shops. Roman women, especially among poorer families, often worked far more than many people imagine. Their labor helped keep households alive. It also helped keep the city itself functioning. The contrast between rich and poor appears almost everywhere. When illness strikes a wealthy household, physicians may be summoned more quickly. When illness visits a poorer family, neighbors often become the first source of help. When a wealthy child outgrows clothing, new garments may be commissioned. When a poorer child outgrows a tunic, it is carefully altered, patched, and passed to a younger brother or sister. Nothing useful is wasted. Resourcefulness becomes its own kind of wealth. As evening approaches, the streets gradually fill once more. Laborers return home carrying tired shoulders and empty baskets. Servants hurry through the markets completing final errands before dark. Well-dressed families prepare for evening dinners where poets may recite verses and musicians perform. Elsewhere, simpler households gather around humble meals of bread, lentils, vegetables, and perhaps a little cheese. The menus are different. The conversations often are not. Parents ask children about their day. Neighbors discuss tomorrow's market. Someone complains about rising prices. Someone else jokes that the baker somehow made the loaf smaller without lowering the price. Apparently, inflation has a remarkably long history. Laughter follows. Even difficult days leave room for humor. Watching these households, you begin to realize something historians have increasingly emphasized. The distance between rich and poor shaped daily life, but it did not erase shared humanity. A wealthy mother still worried when her child developed a fever. A poor mother felt exactly the same fear. A wealthy wife celebrated her daughter's wedding. A poorer wife celebrated with equal happiness, even if the feast was much smaller. Grief visited every neighborhood. So did hope. The Roman Empire often appears in history books as a world of emperors, legions, and magnificent monuments. Standing here among ordinary homes, however, you see another empire. One built each morning by bakers kneading dough before sunrise. By women carrying water through crowded streets. By mothers comforting frightened children. By grandmothers patiently teaching young girls how to spin wool. By families sharing simple meals after long days of work. These quiet lives rarely appeared in official records. Yet without them, Rome itself could never have endured. As the sun slowly disappears behind the western hills, a warm golden light settles across the city. Windows begin glowing with the flicker of oil lamps. The sounds of merchants fade. Temple bells echo softly through the evening air. You make your way home, grateful for the roof above your head, whatever its size may be. The familiar doorway welcomes you once again. Your child runs eagerly to meet you, proudly carrying a small wooden toy that has somehow survived another adventurous day. You smile. Some treasures cannot be measured in silver coins or marble columns. Tonight, as you settle beside the softly glowing lamp, you find yourself thinking less about wealth and more about the ordinary moments that truly define a life. Tomorrow, our journey will take us beyond the city streets and into the final years of a Roman woman's life. We will discover how aging, widowhood, family, memory, and legacy shaped the last chapters of her story, and why growing old in ancient Rome brought both new freedoms and new challenges. For every life, no matter how remarkable or ordinary, eventually reaches its autumn. Growing old in ancient Rome, the quiet autumn of life. The evening settles gently over Rome. From your doorway, you watch the last streaks of sunlight fade behind the city's rooftops. The day's noise gradually softens. Merchants finish sweeping the dust from in front of their shops. The final customers disappear into narrow streets carrying baskets of bread and vegetables. Somewhere nearby, a mother calls her children home for supper. One by one, oil lamps begin glowing behind open windows. The city that had bustled with endless movement only hours before now seems content to rest. Inside your home, the familiar evening routine unfolds almost without thought. The cooking pots have been washed. The table has been cleared. Your child, no longer quite so tiny, chatters happily about the day's adventures before finally growing sleepy. As you gently tuck a wool blanket around those small shoulders, you pause for a moment. It feels as though only yesterday you were preparing the cradle before your child's birth. Yet now those tiny hands are learning to write simple letters in wax tablets. Those uncertain first steps have become confident runs through the courtyard. Time, you realize, moves far more quietly than anyone notices. Years slip past not in dramatic moments, but in ordinary mornings. One loaf of bread baked after another. One festival after another. One birthday quietly following the last. Before long, your dark hair begins to show the first faint strands of silver. You notice them while arranging your hair before the polished bronze mirror. At first, there are only one or two. You smile. The mirror, after all, has never been especially reliable. Perhaps it is simply playing tricks again. A few months later, there are rather more. The mirror, it seems, has decided to become honest. Growing older in ancient Rome was a gift not everyone received. Life expectancy at birth was lowered by high infant and childhood mortality, and disease, accidents, and difficult childbirth claimed many lives long before old age. Those who reached later adulthood had already survived countless dangers that many neighbors had not. Simply growing old was, in many ways, an achievement. You begin to notice the changes little by little. Climbing the stairs leaves you slightly more breathless than it once did. The heavy grain sack seemed just a little heavier. Your hands, so quick and steady in your youth, now move with calmer patience. Yet age also brings something wonderful. Experience. There is no longer any need to wonder how much grain should be stored before winter. You already know. You can judge fresh olive oil with a single glance. You recognize the signs of approaching rain before clouds have fully gathered. The knowledge earned through decades of ordinary life quietly becomes your greatest treasure. One afternoon, your daughter, now nearly the same age you were when this journey began, asks how to prepare bread for an upcoming family celebration. You smile. Without thinking, your hands begin demonstrating each familiar step. Measure carefully. Knead patiently. Do not rush the fire. You suddenly realize whose voice you sound like. Your mother's. The lessons she once patiently repeated have become your own. History often celebrates famous teachers and philosophers. Yet countless daughters learned life's most important lessons beside kitchen fires rather than inside schools. These quiet classrooms shape generations. As your children grow into adults, the household changes once again. The rooms that once echoed with children's laughter become calmer. Some sons leave to begin households of their own. A daughter marries and moves into another family's home, just as you once did. The day she leaves is joyful. It is also surprisingly emotional. You remember standing in her place many years ago, wondering what kind of future awaited you beyond your parents' doorway. Now you stand where your mother once stood. Watching. Smiling. Trying not to cry until after everyone else has gone inside. Life has quietly completed another circle. Grandchildren soon follow. The house, once peaceful again, suddenly fills with little footsteps, curious questions, and astonishing amounts of energy. You discover something remarkable. Grandchildren possess a unique talent. They exhaust you completely, and somehow leave you happier because of it. A little boy proudly presents you with a pebble he insists is the finest stone in all of Italy. A granddaughter carefully imitates the way you spin wool, producing something that resembles more of a tangled bird's nest than thread. You praise her effort anyway. Every skilled craft begins with imperfect attempts. The afternoons become gentler now. Instead of carrying heavy baskets through crowded markets, you often sit in the shaded courtyard with other older women. Together you spin wool, mend clothing, shell beans, or simply enjoy conversation while children play nearby. The stories have changed. Years ago, everyone discussed weddings. Now they discuss grandchildren. Years ago, people worried about first pregnancies. Now they exchange remedies for aching knees. Some topics, however, never disappear. The price of olive oil, apparently, remains a reliable subject of conversation at every stage of life. As the warm afternoon slowly gives way to evening, you realize that your role within the family has quietly transformed. You no longer carry every responsibility. Instead, you carry something perhaps even more valuable. Memory. You remember which relatives came from distant provinces. You remember the terrible winter when food was scarce. You remember festivals long before your grandchildren were born. You remember family members whose names younger generations know only through your stories. Without realizing it, you have become the keeper of your family's history. And in a world without photographs, recordings, or written diaries for most ordinary people, that responsibility matters enormously. As twilight settles gently over Rome once again, you watch your grandchildren chase one another across the courtyard while their parents prepare the evening meal. You smile quietly. The work that once belonged entirely to you now belongs to another generation. The legacy left behind. Another spring arrives in Rome. The almond trees bloom once again beyond the city walls, market stalls overflow with fresh vegetables, and swallows return to nest beneath familiar rooftops. Seasons have come and gone so many times now that you no longer count them. Instead, you notice the passage of time in quieter ways. A grandchild who once needed to be carried now races through the courtyard. A daughter who once sought your advice now gives the same advice to her own children. The household continues, just as it always has. Only the faces have slowly changed. Your mornings are gentler than they once were. You still wake early, more from habit than necessity. For decades your body learned to greet the sunrise before the rest of the household, and old routines are remarkably difficult to forget. You sit beside the doorway with a cup of watered wine or warm herbal drink, watching the city awaken. The sounds are comfortingly familiar. The baker's oven. The distant splash of water being drawn from the fountain. The steady footsteps of merchants beginning another day's work. Rome has changed since your youth. New buildings have appeared. Old ones have been repaired or replaced. Children you once knew have become parents, and some have already become grandparents themselves. The city feels both wonderfully different and comfortingly the same. Your children now insist that you leave the heavier work to them. When you reach for a grain sack, someone gently takes it from your hands. When you offer to carry water from the fountain, your grandson smiles and says he has already done it. At first, you find this slightly frustrating. You are quite certain you could still carry that basket. Perhaps. Well, maybe not the largest basket. Growing older requires learning a different kind of strength. It means accepting help with the same grace that you once offered it to others. Not everyone reaches this stage of life together. Some of your oldest friends are no longer waiting for you at the baths or the marketplace. One passed away after a long illness. Another family moved to a distant province years ago. A third friend simply grew too frail to leave home often. Their absence is quietly felt. You still catch yourself expecting to see familiar faces among the market stalls before remembering they are no longer there. It is one of the quiet sorrows of growing old. You carry more memories than companions. If your husband has also lived into old age, the two of you have settled into an easy companionship. There is less need for long conversations. A glance often says enough. You know which stories he will tell before he begins them. He knows exactly when you are pretending not to notice that he has once again misplaced his sandals. Some habits survive every stage of life. If, however, you become a widow, a reality many Roman women eventually faced, life changes once more. Widowhood brings sadness, certainly. But it can also bring unexpected independence. Some widows manage their own property. Others oversee family businesses until children are old enough to inherit responsibility. Many become respected elders whose advice is sought during family decisions. Roman society often viewed older widows with considerable respect, especially if they had successfully raised children and managed households through difficult years. Your influence no longer comes from youth. It comes from wisdom. On warm afternoons, grandchildren gather around your chair asking for stories. Tell us about your wedding. What was Rome like when you were little? Is it true you once saw a triumph pass through the forum? You smile. The questions never seem to end. Neither, thankfully, do the stories. You describe crowded festivals filled with music and flowers. You tell them about your first visit to the bustling marketplace after your marriage. You laugh while remembering how terrified you felt before your first child was born. The children listen with wide eyes, as though you were describing another world. In many ways, you are. Because the Rome of your youth has already become history. One quiet evening, after the family has finished supper, you remain seated in the courtyard a little longer than usual. The sky above the city glows with soft shades of orange before slowly fading into violet. A gentle breeze stirs the olive trees. Somewhere nearby, someone begins singing an old song that you have known since childhood. You close your eyes for a moment. What, you wonder, will people remember about your life? No statue will be carved in your honor. No historian will write your name beside those of emperors or generals. No triumphal arch will celebrate the meals you prepared, the tears you comforted, the children you raised, or the countless ordinary mornings you spent keeping a household together. And yet, without women like you, Rome could never have been Rome. Every famous Roman was once a child carried by a mother. Every senator once sat at a family table. Every soldier once learned kindness or failed to learn it inside a home. Empires are often remembered for battles. But they survive because ordinary people wake each morning and quietly do what must be done. As darkness gently settles across the city, the younger members of the family begin lighting the evening lamps. You notice that no one asks how. They already know. You taught them years ago. The bread rises perfectly because someone remembered your recipe. The wool is spun correctly because patient hands once guided younger fingers. The stories continue because you took the time to tell them. That is legacy. Not marble. Not gold. Not power. But knowledge passed lovingly from one generation to the next. The lamps glow warmly throughout the house, just as they did on your very first evening as a young bride so many years ago. The city outside is still alive. Merchants still bargain. Children still laugh. Neighbors still exchange stories over garden walls. Rome continues. And somewhere, in another home across the city, another young woman is waking before sunrise, beginning her own journey through marriage, motherhood, friendship, hardship, and hope. Much has changed. Much never will. Thank you for spending these quiet hours wandering through the streets of ancient Rome. As the last lamp flickers softly and the city settles beneath a blanket of stars, you may close your eyes knowing that history is not only the story of emperors, victories, and monuments. It is also the story of ordinary women whose patience, resilience, kindness, and quiet determination held families and, in many ways, an entire civilization together. And perhaps, as sleep gently finds you, that is the most remarkable story of all.